Call to order the meeting of the Monday, April 8th, Verona Common Council meeting at 7 p.m. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Next, we'll have the roll.
Alderperson Cronin.
Present.
Alderperson Gaskell.
Here.
Alderperson Journey.
Here.
Alderperson Kemp.
Here.
Alderperson Cole.
Here.
Alderperson Posey.
Here.
Alderperson Reekie.
Here.
Alderperson Touche.
Present.
Excellent. Everyone's here. We will move on to item 4. This is a little bit different. Normally we have public comment first on the agenda, but considering some of the public interest regarding safety at North Main Street and Llanos, we decided to do the presentation first so everyone could be working from the same information. And for this, I'll turn it over to the interim city admin, Mr. Sayer.
Thank you. As Mayor Diaz explained, we have a couple different kind of items on the agenda relating to the intersection of Main and Llanos Street. We have item number 4, which is a presentation by staff. Then we also have item number 11, which is discussion and possible action on transportation and pedestrian modifications to the intersection of North Main Street and Llanos Street. All this stems from a traffic crash that occurred at that intersection on March 11th, and that was a crash with a vehicle and a pedestrian. After that incident took place, staff began looking at that intersection. We were contacted by the mayor and directed also to look at that intersection as well. A couple kind of things that I think to clarify. One, the mayor does not have direct authority to direct staff just to kind of build to put improvements in place that are on a significant scale at that intersection. That is something that takes actual council approval. I know it's one of the comments I've heard out there of, can't the mayor just direct staff to do that? No, he does not have that authority. So the council needs to direct staff to make those improvements because they have the authority on the approval standpoint, but they also have the budget authority. So if there is a budget component to any type of improvements out there, that's also something the council needs to sign off on, and that most likely could occur as part of the 2019 borrowing package, depending if there are recommendations tonight. So kind of the sequence for what's going to happen here tonight is there'll be a very brief presentation by Chief Bernie Coughlin just about the crash, and then there'll be a presentation by the city's Director of Public Works there in Jacobson, and also Jess Billmeyer, who's with AECOM. AECOM is the city's engineer. And then after the presentation, there'll be the chance for public comment, which is item number 5. And then on item number 11 is where discussion and possible action can occur by the Common Council. So on item number 11, that's where the council can make a recommendation if you choose to do so, or you can provide direction to staff to look into something even more, but that's where the action item will fall for the Common Council. So that's the general process tonight. Does anyone have any questions about the process? So I think with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Coughlin, and we can start the presentation.
Okay, thank you. One of the challenges that we have in taking a look at a crash like this is our city leaders want to take any change or improvements to this intersection into consideration, and they want to do so in a timely fashion. However, with that, we have an incident or a case that is still active and not disposed of. So in the interest of confidentiality for those people involved in this crash, we're not going to mention names at all. We're going to speak in general terms as much as possible. So as City Administrator Sayer said, the crash occurred on Monday, March 11th at 4:15 p.m. in which the Verona Police Department responded with Fitch-Verona EMS and Verona Fire. In summary, a juvenile male was at the northeast corner of the intersection of Llanos and North Main Street, waiting to cross North Main Street in a westerly direction with the intent of meeting someone on the other side of the street. Northbound traffic, 2 lanes. The inner lane closest to the median is lane number 1, as we label it, and the outer lane or furthest lane to the east, also northbound, is lane number 2. A vehicle occupying lane number 1 observed the pedestrian with a desire to cross the street. That vehicle came to a stop. The vehicle in the number 2 lane at that point in time was focused and concerned about the unit in lane number 1, and that driver did not stop. That driver struck the pedestrian as the pedestrian was running across the street. As a result of pedestrian being struck, obviously that juvenile was transported to the hospital, received serious injuries. I understand to date that they're recovering well, and we wish them and the family all the best in making a full recovery. We did end up citing the driver of vehicle number 1, which was in the lane number 2, for failure to yield right away to pedestrian. That's pretty much a summary of the event, unless there are specific questions from council or the mayor.
Any questions from the council? Seeing none? Mr. Jacobson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name's Theron Jacobson. For the public, I'm the Director of Public Works. To my left, your right, is Jess Billmeyer, our traffic engineer that is also a resident of Verona, and his children also attend the Verona Area School District, so we have some history not only with his expertise, but his own personal observations. So the outline, we've already kind of briefed on the opening thoughts from the administrator. Thanks Chief Coughlin for the event details, and we're going to go into basically the engineering details, requirements, professional judgments, and what options are available for improvements at the intersection. We'll go into the crash data, and then we'll take questions, presumably during the discussion and action items, so that way we can get through this presentation. There is a lot of data in here, so if there's any questions you do have, I believe Ms. Clark provided handouts, so you could write down them next to the slide. That way we could reference them in a timely manner. The location, as Chief Coughlin said, was at the intersection of Main and Llanos. It's adjacent to 2 of the Verona Area School District schools, the Badger Ridge area and the Verona Area High School. And what has been completed to date is Mr. Billmeyer has interviewed both the crossing guards at the intersections. And one thing I do want to point out that these crossing guards do a very good job during the hours that they are present, managing traffic and managing the kids to get them across in a safe manner. So good job to them. We also had a coordination meeting with the Verona Area School District, Mr. Gorell and his staff members last Wednesday, and had a productive meeting, and their thoughts, input have also been provided into the options in regards to the school circulation, which we will get into the details very shortly. And then we've installed a no U-turn sign, which if you haven't seen it, it's got orange flags and has created some redirection of traffic. We also did traffic counts. Not a lot of people probably knew that we did that, but we did do that also. March 18th through the 20th. And basically we're at the evaluation of the planning levels. That's basically what we're presented tonight, and also the police have increased their presence out there. So I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Billmeyer to discuss the intersection details.
All right, we've got a map of the intersection in front of you, just to get everybody familiar with how things work. At this location, there are 2 lanes in each direction, going north and south on Main Street, and there's a left turn lane in each direction to turn into the school or turn into Llanos. Coming out of the school, there is a right turn only lane, and then a through and left lane, where you can make both of those movements from the single lane. On Llano Street, it's a single lane to turn left, go straight, or turn right. The speed limit on Main Street in this area is 25 miles per hour, so it's the lowest allowed. And we do reduce it to 15 miles per hour when children are present for the school zone. There's really two different operational challenges that are happening at this intersection. One involves cars and then one involves pedestrians. And they happen at two different times of the day, so I like to treat them separately. The first operational challenge is the vehicular congestion at the drop-off and pickup for school. This occurs over a pretty short window from 8 in the morning to about 8:30, and again when school lets out from about 3:20 to about 3:50. And we'll talk about that congestion in a second. Operational challenge number 2 is pedestrians crossing during the non-school hours, so after the crossing guards have left. This road is a pretty wide street and there's not much median in the middle for them to get refuge on. So for them to make it all the way across the street, they need a pretty large gap in Main Street traffic. And there's no guard there to help crossings at all of the other hours of the day. So talk through the operational challenges first. As Theron mentioned, we took traffic counts in late March. On March 19th is the one that we counted. The highest hour during the AM peak was from 7:30 to 8:30, so that's no surprise, the hour before school starts. There's about 875 vehicles passing through the intersection on Main Street. They're just going north and south through, not turning into the school or Llanos. So a fair amount of traffic. I'd say more than half of it is going north into the Madison area. Maybe 40-something% are coming into Verona. Coming out of the school, we counted 51 vehicles making either a left or going straight coming out of the school peak. And 70% of those vehicles, 36, were in the last 15 minutes of the hour, so that 8:15 to 8:30, there's definitely a really high spike in traffic as parents are dropping off their kids just before school. There's about 2 or 3 per minute that can get out to turn left or go straight. We also counted about 180 vehicles turning right coming out of the school. And again, a very high percentage in that last 15 minutes before school starts. About 6 to 7 per minute exiting to turn right. We did count 35 pedestrians crossed with the crossing guard. And we've noticed that volume changes depending on what the weather is. So the day after we counted again, there were 50. So the day before, there was about 24. So it does vary quite a bit over the 3 days that we counted. 35 was about the average, the day in the middle, but it does range from, say 20 to 50, depending on how nice the weather is. So the way the intersection works is if you're leaving the school and wanting to turn left or go straight, you almost have to have your head on a swivel. There's so many different places to look. So on your screen, what I've shown is the priority of who gets to go first at the intersection. So the first priority that everybody is paying attention to is the crossing guard. I kind of like to say they're the kings of the intersection. And as Theron said, they do a really nice job of commanding the intersection about when the kids should go. They'll hold the kids when traffic is really bad, try to get a group of them and cross all at once. And they are very mindful about what the traffic is like at the intersection, and I think they do a nice job of controlling it. But they're the number one priority. Everybody pays attention to them. When they want to put the stop sign up, everybody has to stop. Priority number 2, so who gets to go after they're done in the street? There's a heavy Main Street inbound right turn, so if you're coming from the top of the map down to turn right, those people have the next priority because they're a right turn into the driveway. After they're done turning, priority number 3 is the left turn coming into the site, so coming from the bottom of the page and turning in. They all get to go, and that clears out with all of the buses turning into the school. And then after all of those 3 priorities are finished, the exiting traffic can leave the school. So if you're a left turner coming out of the school, you've got to check, is the guard coming out? Is there somebody turning right? Is there somebody coming from that way? So you're kind of looking at a lot of different places at once, and it's pretty easy for them to make mistakes. If you're not familiar, I want to highlight what the start and end of school operations look like at the school. We've got the crossing guard on the north leg of the intersection. The parent drop-off and pickup for Badger Ridge and Core Knowledge is right in front of the school. You would come into the driveway, make an immediate right as a one-way, drop your kids off on the curb, come back out to the street, and turn left to get back out to the intersection. The bus drop-off and pickup is in a different location. They come in the same driveway, but they drive further into the site and make a left to the road that kind of goes in front of the track. And those buses drop off and pick up both the middle school students and the high school students. So the buses and parent drop-off are separate. And then the buses exit on a different intersection further to the south. All right, so how are drivers navigating this now? They kind of have three approaches that drivers are using to exit the school site. The left turns, what they'll do is they'll wait for the crossing guard to stop traffic. The left turn turning into the site will kind of clear out, and after that left turn clears out, people will kind of nudge their way into the intersection and kind of park in the middle. And they'll wait for the crossing guard to be finished, and then they'll complete their movement. Doing it that way, about 1 or 2 cars can go every time the crossing guard stops someone. People are also turning right and making an illegal U-turn at the end of the median. So they'll turn right out of the driveway, drive to the bottom of the sheet, and make a U-turn around the end of that median. It is illegal to make a U-turn at a mid-block location in Wisconsin unless the maintaining authority of the highway allows U-turns mid-block. The third thing parents are doing is they're dropping off and picking up on Llanos so that they don't have to make the left turn at all. And they're letting the kids cross Main Street with the crossing guard. So they'll drop off on the sidewalk on Llanos Street and then let their kids cross with the crossing guard and then make a right turn to head to the north. All right, operational challenge number 2 is pedestrian crossings of Main Street during the non-school hours. So pedestrians crossing Main Street have about 70 feet to cross with no refuge. So there's 4 through lanes and a left turn lane in the middle, and then there's about a 6-foot median with only 4 feet on top of the curb as a median refuge. So about 70 feet. Kids walk about 3 to 3.5 feet per second on average, so it's going to take them a little bit more than 20 seconds to make it across the street. So looking for a gap of 20 seconds in a stream this busy can be challenging. The speed limit is 25 miles per hour and 15 when children are present and the official school crossing is posted. I want to highlight a very common safety issue on 4-lane highways. It's called the double threat safety issue. The way that it works is you have a pedestrian, or in this case it could be a car trying to go straight across the intersection. They're waiting to go. Number 1, the car A stops for the pedestrian to cross. And oftentimes that car that stopped will, wave somebody along like, I'm here to let you go. Car B, the pedestrian will enter the street, and car B that's coming up behind, their vision is blocked by the vehicle that stopped, so they don't know why that vehicle is stopped. And the pedestrian can't see that car because the car in the right lane has stopped. And before either realizes that the other is there, you have a crash. So we see this issue quite a bit, and you'll hear me reference it as the double threat safety issue. So when you're crossing a 4-lane highway, make sure that both lanes are stopped before you enter the road. I want to cover the crash history at the intersection. So we looked at the years from 2013 to 2018. That covers 6 years, including the 13 and 18 year. There were 4 crashes at this intersection over those 6 years. 3 of the crashes were from vehicles coming out of the middle school being hit by northbound drivers. So they would have been leaving the middle school going straight onto Llanos, and all 3 were hit by vehicles in the far lane going northbound. So the furthest lane that they had to cross was the one that hit them. One of the crashes had a minor injury, but otherwise no serious injuries with those crashes. The other crash was a northbound rear end where the lead vehicle stopped for the crossing guard, but a distracted driver behind didn't stop. Was a rear end crash. All 4 crashes happened during the school drop-off and pickup time frame, so there have been no crashes outside of the school peak times. Also worth noting is none of the crashes during that 6-year period involved a pedestrian, and as Theron has said earlier, the crossing guards there are awesome at keeping the kids safe. They do a really nice job of commanding the intersection and keeping the kids in safe locations. For reference, I wanted to bring up the crashes at the Main Street and Cross Country. So this is the signal just north of the intersection. During that same 6-year period, there were 22 crashes at that intersection. All right, so I want to introduce the options. When we're doing the engineering analysis process, we usually use a 2-step process when we're looking at options. First, we come up with as many ideas as we can come up with, and we do what's called a red flag analysis to try to eliminate some of the options. And the presentation at hand, we've tried to give you a lot of different options and give you pros and cons, and I'd say we're kind of at that first step of evaluating the options that are there. After we get to a smaller number, however many you choose, we have more detailed engineering analysis to do on the selected options. We need to do things like see where the utilities are, see how the drainage is going to work. We haven't done any of that engineering design of any of these options at this point. So there is more work to do after an option is selected tonight before something can be implemented. I also want to bring up that the options can be packaged together, so we've tried to keep them as kind of individual menu items. And if you want to choose 2 options and put them together, that's completely fine. We tried to make it so that you could mix and match them if you choose.
The options, I'll start out with the options at hand. These are a tunnel or a bridge option. These are the 2 most expensive options. What I'm going to do is leave the image up of the options, and then I'll read the pros and cons that are in front of me just so everyone can still get a visual of what we're looking at. The pros for a tunnel is it separates the pedestrians and the vehicular traffic, so it's a grade separated crossing, as these are called. The cons of it: cost, the land acquisitions required, timing, construction, traffic control challenges. Ramps to the tunnel may not be as convenient, meaning the end approaches. Is it easier just to cross Main Street instead of actually utilizing the tunnel? Storm sewer drainage conflicts, lift station for the actual tunnel to keep it dry during rain events, and the long-term operation and maintenance challenges and costs. Cost on this could be around $2.5 million. So the bridge option is very similar to the tunnel via location and certain pros and cons. Basically, the only other advantage of the bridge is an aesthetic feature. But additional con on that is a overhead clearance issue, because County Highway M is part of the National Highway System, so we're also definitely going to have to meet any WSDOT and federal highway standards for clearances, etc. Cost on this estimated $2 million. Timing on both of these would be multiple years from design, budgeting, and then to get construction for full implementation. The next option, Jess and I will tag team this together, but is basically the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, which is being utilized in a lot of crossings. We have some within the city of Verona. We just installed one on Old PB last summer as part of the bridge reconstruction projects. We have one at the Military Ridge State Trail crossing and 2 south of there along South Main Street. The photo at hand in front of you is over in Fitchburg. That is on McKee Road, County Highway PD, east of Verona Road. Jess, you want to take it from here?
Sure. Yeah, so all of the ones, we'll call this the RFB or sometimes the beacon option. I need the mic over here. Thank you. So yeah, we'll refer to this as the RFB or the beacon option. The reason I chose the picture in Fitchburg is because all of the sites where we've installed these in Verona have been 2-lane roadways. And since Main Street's 4 lanes, I wanted to show you a 4-lane example because they're slightly different. So the ones in Verona, there's always the post on the right that has the button and the flasher. What you do on 4-lane highways is you put in a pole and then have an arm that goes over the lanes to have the flasher above the roadway. And the reason for that is that double threat that we talked about earlier, that if a car is blocking the right pole, we want the car in the left lane to be able to see the flasher that's above. But it does cost more to have the pole and the arm going over the road. In this case, the pole would be on the right side of Main Street rather than the median like this one. There's just not enough room in the median on Main Street to put a pole.
So the construction of this would be mirror the median pole and arm, and basically just put it over in the terrace, and then extend the arm the opposite way for constructability purposes. I am going to switch to the pros and cons slide here because there's a lot of detail on this one that I think everyone should see.
All right, so they've done a lot of studies on RFBs, and they've been shown to reduce pedestrian crashes by about 50%. One of the pros is there's an immediate response when the pedestrian pushes the button. So as soon as you push the button, the yellow flashers start to go, and traffic should recognize that you're there. These are high visibility LED flashers, so the vehicle stopping effectiveness is about 75% with the RFBs versus people stop about 2% of the time if there's no treatment. So if you have just a pedestrian standing at the side of the road, cars are unlikely to stop. Whereas if you have one of these beacons, they're very likely to stop. This would provide pedestrian assistance at all times of the day. With a median refuge, pedestrians are more confident to cross the median and wait for a gap in the other direction. This does reduce the double threat crashes for pedestrians because you've got that flasher kind of alerting drivers in the other lane that something's going on. And the beacons really augment the crossing guards. So currently the crossing guards are really hesitant to get into the street. You know, they kind of put their foot out and kind of hold the sign and wait for somebody to stop. And then once they see everybody is stopping, they'll go further into the street. So we feel like this beacon would augment the crossing guards. They could push the button to get drivers' attention to get into the street. Some cons to the beacon is it really doesn't affect the vehicle exiting conflicts at the intersection. It's really a pedestrian treatment. It may give pedestrians a false sense of security. They may push the button and say, all right, I pushed it, now I can go. You do still have to stop and wait for the traffic to stop. And then we may see an increase in rear end crashes as you had that same distracted driving where the person in front stops and the person behind doesn't notice them.
Regarding the rear end crashes, that's a cause from basically any stop control treatment, whether it's a stop sign, a RFB, a traffic signal, or a hawk. Those are all cons of a stop control traffic control device. So I just wanted to point that out to everyone. That
All right, the next series of options are all kind of related to the school circulation. The first is called the school circulation option. What this one would do is move the parent drop-off exit to be where the buses exit. So rather than going back out to the intersection where they're currently turning left, they would go out past the buses and exit at the bus exit. Currently that roadway is a two-lane street that goes one way southbound. And the idea would be the buses would drop off on the curb on the right side, and the cars would drive by them on the left side, the side that students aren't exiting on. Pros of this is it separates the parent drop-off, that exit conflict that we're seeing at Main and Llanos. It puts that exiting conflict further south onto Main Street. It gets it away from the crossing guard area. It reduces the conflict on Main Street where it's 4 lanes. Where the driveway comes out on the south end, there are 3 lanes there. And another pro is this can be done with existing infrastructure. A cons is it's a best practice at schools to try to separate the bus and parent traffic. You want to have the parents and bus drop-offs in 2 different places. It works a lot better if you do it that way. There are still conflicts at the new intersection to the south. It conflicts with some of the bus safety checks that the buses do after they've dropped off all the kids. So they'll drop off the kids and then they pull into a safe place further down the street, and then they check to see that all the kids are off, all the backpacks and things have been taken off of the bus before they get off to the rest of their day. The school, when they do the lift and move in 2020, they're planning a playground in the middle of the green area, in that area. So this would have additional cars crossing where the crossing to the playground would be. The school district was very worried about the bus exit congestion. Currently, they're not conflicting with any cars trying to get out. And so if there are parents, particularly on leaving school, exiting that same driveway, it would delay the buses from getting kids home and getting them to their next thing. And yeah, there still would be congestion at this new exit. Another circulation option would be to add a second access point to the school exit. Yep, sorry. What this is showing is a one-way exit onto Basswood Avenue. What this would do is it would allow drivers to exit to Hemlock Drive to get out to Cross Country Road and then use the signal at Cross Country to make any turns that they would need to make. Some pros of this one: again, it reduces the exiting traffic at the current Main and Llanos intersection. It does allow exiting traffic to access a traffic signal at Cross Country Road to make their left turns. If you do exit out this direction, it's all right turn movements to get to Cross Country. So you exit onto Basswood, turn right onto Hemlock, turn right onto Cross Country, and you're back out to the signal. Another pro is it would allow Cross Country neighborhood to access. They could basically get back to the neighborhood without using Main Street. So you may actually reduce traffic on Main Street with this option. Some cons, and if we can go back to the map, there's a really important crosswalk that this would cross. So if you remember where that bus drop-off was, all the kids that take the bus, they exit there and have to cross the crosswalk that Theron is highlighting. And there's actually a lot more kids in that crosswalk than there are on Main Street. So this pattern would have more vehicles crossing that crosswalk. We think that would require an additional crossing guard at the internal crossing. Currently, it's being staffed by a teacher, and the teachers don't feel comfortable with the level of traffic that this would have, and they asked for more professional assistance if it went this direction. This would increase traffic on Basswood and Hemlock Drive. It would cause some loss of green and play area at the school, and it may actually require sidewalk on Hemlock. So the houses and residents on Hemlock, they currently go to Country View Elementary, and so if they're walking there, they're walking in the street currently. And if we're adding a significant amount of traffic to those streets, we may want to put those kids on a sidewalk. All right, the last circulation option is we're calling the turn restriction option. So what this would do is it would restrict the exiting traffic to only be able to turn right out of the school driveway. So how this would work is when the crossing guards show up in the morning or when they show up for the after school period, while they're putting out the cones in the street, they would also put cones out blocking the left and through lane leaving the school. Everybody coming out would have to turn right, and they would need to, if they intended to head north on Main Street, they'd have to find another way to turn around. Either on other city streets or turn around in driveways. But yeah, they'd have to find a different way to turn around and head back to the north. Some pros of this is it can be implemented now. It eliminates the worst vehicle conflicts at the intersection. So instead of, exiting drivers having their head on the swivel, they really just need to look to the left and make sure nobody is coming on Main Street to be able to make their turn. So it's a lot simpler maneuver for the drivers and a much safer exiting movement. Reduces the intersection conflict points. That's what where you have to look is. And doing it with this temporary nature just when the crossing guards are there allows the left turn during the rest of the day. So if you have to pick up your kid for a dentist appointment or whatever, when it's less busy, you can still make left turns and throughs with this option. The big con is that school traffic destined to the north has to be rerouted, so there's significant driver inconvenience with this option about having to drive out of your way to go back to the north. We think pedestrian crossings will increase across Main Street because parents may drop their kids off on Llanos and make the right rather than go into the school, have to turn right, and then figure out their way to get back to the north. We think initially there'll be some driver education and compliance issues as you switch to a new pattern. And you may have increased operational costs for the crossing guards, for the cones, and things like the hut there isn't quite large enough to fit all of the cones in it. Some operational issues like that. Another option is the close the median completely option. So this is similar to the not having left turns coming out of the driveway, except you would do it for the entire day. So how this would work is you would essentially close the left turn lane to Llanos and make it a much wider median, and extend that median south into the intersection so that it prevented people from turning left out of the school or left out of Llanos. You would still be able to turn left into the school. That's the main bus movement in, so we would need to keep that movement allowed. Go ahead.
This is similar to some of the major highways, like US Highway 151 north of Beaver Dam as you're heading towards Door County. They're called J-turns. So basically it eliminates that left turn out of oncoming traffic. You take a right, go to a spot where there's a median opening, and you do a U-turn, but those are designed, planned, and constructed for that ideal purpose. I just wanted to bring an example of where that's been done, how it's been done, and on a much larger scale, of course, than a urban intersection of this sort.
So the big pro here is this eliminates a lot of the conflicts at the intersection. So it eliminates that side road left turn. Again, you have one decision to make, look to the left. If it's clear, you can make your right turn. So it's a lot safer intersection. This would provide a wider median refuge for the pedestrians. So as I mentioned earlier, the median is really narrow and it's not very comfortable to stand in. This would create a much wider median to cross halfway and then do the other half. This would probably reduce traffic on Llanos Street. So you can't turn left into it anymore. So if you were headed to the library or maybe North Edge Trail, you couldn't turn left here. You'd have to turn left at Cross Country and kind of come in that side. So you'd see less traffic on Llanos Street. The intersection would work better because you're not waiting as much to turn left. And those angle crashes that we did see at the intersection where people were going straight across, it would eliminate those types of crashes. Cons, again, the major one is the driver inconvenience. You've got to turn right, and if you're headed to the north, you need to find a different way to get to your destination. That inconvenience, rather than the turn restriction option, would be for all hours of the day. Llanos Street that wants to go into downtown no longer would be able to turn left here. They would have to go down Enterprise and go through Silent Street and Harriet, or just go all the way to Verona Avenue to get downtown. This will increase the left turn traffic at the cross-country signal. And again, pedestrian crossings may increase because parents don't want to go into the school. They'll drop off on Llanos and let the kids cross with the guard.
The traffic signal option, there are quite a few slides on this to discuss. To put a traffic signal up, we just can't put a traffic signal up legally. What we have to do is, it's called a warrant analysis. So basically, you have to justify and meet the needs to warrant a signal. So, and there's, as you can see on the slide, there's 9 warrants to meet. 6, 8, and 9 do not apply towards this intersection, so we won't even discuss those. We copied some information right out of the Manual Uniform Traffic Control Devices. That's the national federal regulation that identifies traffic control devices, whether they're for construction or permanent, it's pavement markings, signage, and or signals. So as you can see, the word shall, that is the key word, is shall be, not should. Shall. That's very similar to recommended versus required. That's the key language here, that we shall do a warrant analysis. So I just wanted to open that up with that statement. The traffic counts that were done by Bill Meyer's team will identify warrants 1 through 3, and then we'll get into details of 4, 5, and 7 also.
Sure, so if you want to go back one real quick. So the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, we call it the MUTCD, so I'll call it that later. What it does is it makes sure that when you leave Wisconsin and you drive in Illinois, the signs and everything look the same. So it's a national standard with how traffic and signals look. And it is required by Wisconsin law that we follow the MUTCD. The MUTCD says we need to do an engineering study to warrant a signal. We haven't completed that yet, so what I'm showing you now is kind of the preliminary thoughts on what that study would result in. So we'll show you warrant 3. This is the peak hour volume. So what this asks you to do is look at the highest volume that occurs in any hour of the day. It needs at least 100 vehicles to turn left or go straight from the side road driveway. So if you remember, we counted about 51 at this intersection, so we're less than the peak hour warrant. The peak hour at this intersection is the highest volume during the whole day. It gets less congested during the middle of the day and during the night hours. So the 8-hour and 4-hour volume warrant they're not even close to being met at this location. There's really only about 45 minutes of high traffic over the 24 hours of the day. Warrant 4 is the pedestrian volume. What the MATCD prescribes there is you need at least 107 pedestrians per hour, and you need more if the volume on the street is lower. We counted 35 at this intersection and 50 on the highest day, so again, not close to meeting the pedestrian warrant. Warrant 7 is crash experience. What they prescribe there is you need 5 or more reported crashes of type susceptible to correction by a traffic signal within a 1-year period. So we've had 4 crashes in 6 years, so we're not meeting the crash warrant either. The last warrant to discuss is warrant 5, the school crossing. This is probably the most applicable to this intersection. And I put the language of the warrant here on the slide for you. It's, in my opinion, very confusing, so I wouldn't try to read it. But you've got it for your reference. But essentially what I need to do to measure this warrant is I have to go to the intersection and count the number of gaps that are big enough for kids to cross the street in. So say I counted for 20 minutes, I would need to count fewer than 20 gaps, 1 gap per minute, in order to meet the signal warrant. So the trouble at this intersection is that the crossing guards are there creating gaps. So in order to do the study, I would need the crossing guards not to be there. And while it would be awesome for science to do this experiment, I don't really think it's a good idea to have the crossing guards stand down to be able to see if this warrant is met. I did include the last bullet. The MEC also says that I'm required to give consideration to the implementation of other measures, such as the warning signs and flashers, the school speed zones, school crossing guards, or grade separated crossing. So that's a lot of the reason that we're looking at the other options that are included in this presentation. We're actually required to look at them. I also want to get into the mechanics of how the signal would work with the crossing guard. So we have a crossing guard at the intersection of Cross Country and Main, so there's a signal there. And what we've trained the crossing guards to do is they wait for the walk interval to come up, and then they cross the kids with the normal walk interval at the signal. So if there were a signal at Main and Llanos, when that walk interval would come up for the north approach is when the school driveway has a green ball. So the driveway exit would get a green, the crossing guards would go into the crosswalk with their stop signs held high, and essentially block the left turns coming out of the driveway, because that's when we would train them to cross the kids. As I mentioned earlier, it takes about 20 seconds for kids to cross the street. That's about how long we would want to make a green on a side road without making Main Street really congested. So if there were a signal here, I think we would see similar operations to what we see with the guard, where only 2 or 3 cars are getting out to turn left. For the same reason that they're having trouble getting out now, we've still got a crossing guard with kids crossing that north approach. So traffic signal pros and cons. They do establish priority for when the car should go. It's pretty obvious to drivers. They go when it's green and they stop when it's red. It does provide a pedestrian phase when the signal is operating. Some of the signals in this area we do run on flash in the evenings, and there would be no pedestrian interval when it's in flash mode. Would reduce those right angle crashes that we're seeing at the intersection, and would reduce the double threat crashes. Cons is it appears that it may not meet traffic signal warrants, which is a possible liability for the city, and we can do a full study if directed. Signals tend to increase rear end crashes by about 60%. So if you remember the crash experience at Cross Country in Maine, there were more crashes there than at this intersection. The signal is there for 24 hours of the day, and yeah, turning red, it may cause people to have rear ends at all hours of the day. We're concerned that it would increase confusion if the crossing guard and the signal contradict each other. So I mentioned earlier that the crossing guard is the king of the intersection, and we're concerned that a signal may diminish some of the crossing guard's authority if there's different indications. Again, when the kids are crossing, we may not actually get more left turns out than we do today. There will be more backups on Main Street when we stop it to let side road traffic out. The pedestrians have to wait for the signal to change, so when you push the button with the beacon, remember I said it was immediate, that it starts flashing. When you push the button at a signal, you've got to wait for all of the main green to end, turn yellow, turn red, and then you get your walk interval 10 to 15 seconds later usually. This would require coordination with the cross-country traffic signal. They're about 1,000 feet apart, so they're too close to run independently. So there needs to be some communications installed to make them work together. There's a power line on the west side of the road that will have some utility conflicts, and then the pedestrian false sense of security if they push the button.
I'll go over the summary of the options, and this basically is the options we laid out, the timelines and cost. As you can see, the top is the least expensive and most expedited option that can be implemented. And as they go down the page, longer implementation time, more cost. They kind of go hand in hand. And ultimately, we did look at some funding options. The option that is applicable to this intersection is actually the Highway Safety Improvement Program that's administered by the DOT. So ultimately, as you can see, the applications are due very shortly, this fall. And then the funding is up to $200,000 times the potential crash reduction factor for the improvement. So basically a RRFB has a certain crash reduction factor, a traffic signal has a certain crash reduction factor, and then whatever that is, you take 200,000 times X. And then you can see the 10% local match. That would be the preferred route to go. The Safe Routes to School Transportation Alternatives Program is an option, but the timing of that is obviously extended far out, with years to come. So we won't even get into the details of that one. So that is the end. Thank you for listening. We know it was long. There was a lot of detail in there, but we thought it was very important to present all of that so you could make an informed decision. As you know, I'm a detailed person, so that's what you got. So we're stepping away from the floor now.
Thank you very much for that detailed presentation, and thank you for the public for bearing with us. I think it's really important that we all have the same information and we're basically on the same page, even if we don't agree. With that, we will move on to item 5, which is public comment. If there's someone from the public who wishes to speak, now would be the time to do so. And when you do come up to the mic, if you could introduce yourself and give your address and sign in, that would be great as well.
Hello, my name is Nathan Gravine. Actually, the father of the son that got injured at that intersection, and I'm glad to hear that everybody's looking into this. I mean, our city's getting bigger, and the traffic's going to get heavier, and we're going to have more kids going to school, and we just luckily, our son is still alive and we still have him, but we don't need this to happen to any other family out there or any other child. A lot of great decisions, but I got one little question. I know that you were showing the flashing yellow lights, and if they push the button, it automatically comes on. What would happen if you have kids that are spaced like 30 seconds apart? And they keep pushing the button, is that going to be on all the time for that?
Yeah, just one thing. Traditionally,
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, it's okay. Traditionally, we answer questions after the public comment in order to prevent kind of a back and forth to keep the meeting moving.
Oh.
But in this case, I think I'll allow it as the chair, Mr. Jacobson.
Okay, yeah, I just got one thing to say, Mr. Mayor. I do got Mr. Monpas writing down any questions that the public or the council asks, so we can at least, if we need to, Jess and I can brief on to make sure we're responding appropriately. So we can do it either way. The questions that are easier like that, if you want us to address them now, we can.
Yeah, why don't you?
So how an RRFB works, we can set the timing in there. So basically you push the button, it goes for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever the time interval needs to be. Somebody pushes it again, it's gonna go off for another 30 seconds. So if the button keeps getting pushed, the lights will just they'll keep flashing and it'll time out.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Um,
I would assume the crossing guards would be in control of that during
Yes.
school time, so, right? So it won't be
Yeah.
constant kids pushing, it'll be the crossing guard pushing it?
Yeah, that would be the approach, yes. Correct, Sarah.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry to disrupt the flow of council. But yeah, like I said, we just want to make sure it's safe for not only during the school day, but after school too. Like our son was just 15 minutes after the cross guard has left. With the schools being there, there's always, after school activities, there'll be sports, and then also summer school on top of it. So, we're going to have more stuff all the way through, and we just have to it'd just be nice that there's something in place to protect the kids throughout the day and not just this high traffic area, during the coming and going of kids. So, that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking. We are still in public comment, so if anyone wishes to comment, if you could, feel free to do so now.
My name is Jennifer Brady. I am a parent of 2 children that go to Core Knowledge Charter School, which is a kindergarten through 8th grade charter school located in the Badger Ridge building. And so I wrote, I think all of you, an email right after this incident, and I was just going to read it for the rest of the public to hear. I'm contacting you to add my concerned voice to the many in our community who navigate the Badger Ridge Core Knowledge and Administration Building parking lot entrance or drive North Main Street at school start and end times. I've dropped and picked up children in the parking lot and attempted to exit onto North Main Street for 8 years. I actually did some calculations. I've driven the intersection 4,320 times. I've also watched the chaos and danger increase every year. There's heavier traffic, more children, and increasingly distracted and frustrated drivers. My own children know that there's no music, minimal talking when we are driving that area. It takes my complete concentration and peripheral vision, as you kind of spoke about in your report, and swivel head to keep track of all moving bodies and vehicles. The amount of hair-raising, pulse-pounding near misses I have personally witnessed cannot be counted. And now the recent accident of the vehicle versus pedestrian child on the 11th that we've been discussing today. I have called the city many times over the years with my concerns, the mayor's office, planning and development, public works, street department, and all were aware of the public's concern. Each person I spoke to has said I was not the first to call. And yet, after years of advocacy, we are still living on the brink of avoidable tragedy. I have personally seen official observers with their cameras and clipboards at the intersection over the years, recording and watching traffic patterns. I've seen surveyors and their equipment, all of them giving us false hope that perhaps finally traffic lights or some other safer crossing would be installed, but that has been for years. We need your help, we need your resources, advocacy, and cooperation to move the timeline quickly to a solution. Too many young lives are literally in danger every day, and it's not dramatic or an over-exaggeration to say so. As a healthcare practitioner that works in Madison hospitals, I am trained in and participate in medical emergencies and life support for both children and adults. A year ago, I added extra supplies to my car. I was so convinced we would need them in the intersection. I really hope we never do, but the possibility grows every year. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your testimony. We are still in public comment, so if anyone else from the public wishes to speak, now would be the time to do so.
My name is Maria Sanderson, and I'm an RN, and I work for UW Health. And I've been driving my children to school. They also go to Core Knowledge Charter School, which is, again, kindergarten through 8th grade, that shares the building with Badger Ridge. And that intersection between the periods of time that were shown, it's chaos. And I would work in Middleton, and turning left, I mean, it's so dangerous. You have little 5-year-old children that are crossing with the cross guards. You have people coming from Madison for construction, for all of our new neighborhoods, Epic, I mean, it's so chaotic. I don't turn left anymore. I always turn right. But there wasn't the U-turn, the no U-turn. There was never a sign there, and I think a lot of us didn't know that was illegal. So that's the way everybody did to turn around to go towards Madison or Middleton. And it's just trying to, turn left, and then you have children crossing in all directions on every single crosswalk. You have people turning left, you have people inching out to turn left to go towards Madison, and you have the little 5-year-old children that are trying to cross. It's so chaotic. And I just reiterate with what Jennifer said, please, we need your help. I also have called the city, I've emailed people, I've seen people out with their clipboards, but nothing ever gets done. And I've seen many, many near misses also. And thankfully, well, not thankfully, but it's only been 6 accidents, but the amount of near misses, I mean, it's unbelievable. So if something could be done very quickly, we would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We are still in public comment, so.
Good evening. My name is Florence Edwards Miller. I live on Loader Lane, right across from K Park, and I have a 3-year-old child, so she does not go to that school yet, but I anticipate that she will. My husband and I moved in just a couple of years ago, and we specifically moved to Verona and that neighborhood because at the time I was pregnant with my daughter, and we were looking for someplace that was family friendly and specifically walkable. I've been happy to recommend Verona to a lot of my peers, other people who are starting new families. And that neighborhood, that sort of little pocket in there, is increasingly, I'm seeing more and more families. There's more and more children that I see right across from my house at K Park. So I anticipate that just from growth in that neighborhood alone, we're going to see a lot more people walking and crossing, even people who aren't doing the parking on Llano Street. My daughter goes to a daycare on Llano Street, so I arrived at the scene shortly after the accident, and I was horrified but not surprised. I strongly urge you, please do something about this. As we all know, Verona is growing. Other people are making the same decisions that my husband and I did. They're moving, they're starting families, and they are coming to Verona because it is family friendly. And we also know that Verona is growing, and that the density along that corridor is growing. We know that there's a lot of construction happening to make that particular thoroughfare a more efficient way to get around. So while we may not have the stats necessary right this second to justify a street light, I suspect we will have them in a few years. And also, frankly, I would point out that those pedestrian crossing numbers were taken in March. I'd be very interested to see if perhaps we would get that 100 and some kids that you need to be crossing if we do that and when the weather's a little bit better. One point I would make just as a resident of that neighborhood is if we do go with the two options, the turn restriction and the closed median, that is likely, especially if we crack down on people making that illegal U-turn, that's likely to redirect a lot of traffic through my neighborhood, and I'm particularly concerned about Harriet and Noel Way, which would be the natural way to get back out if you're trying to get out of that neighborhood. Those do not have sidewalks. So those may be the right option, but I would hope that you would keep in mind that we may need to put some sidewalks in, because otherwise, if you're going to have a lot more traffic in there, there are going to be conflicts and there are going to be issues. Anyway, I would like to say in the strongest possible terms that this is a problem that is only going to get worse, and I really expect that this council, having been made aware of these issues, will act quickly and decisively to deal with the problem both now and in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We are still in public comment, so if anyone from the public wishes to speak, now would be the time to approach the microphone.
Hi there, my name is Sivakumar. I'm a Verona resident for about 10 years now. I have 2 kids going to core knowledge. So I think a lot of great points were already said by parents, Maria and Jen. So I don't want to repeat a lot of those things. Yeah, so I think a lot of great options were provided. But I think so definitely something needs to be done. It frankly reminds me of India. Sometimes the roads and things are getting better there. So the couple of things I want to point out was I read some when I was looking at the stats about 51 cars kind of going to the left. I don't know when the study was done. It feels like a lot more cars go there within an hour period of time. I'm not trying to challenge. I'm just kind of surprised with that number. It could be also be technically because they are unable to cross their wait. There's a wait period, which I don't know is factored in. So I'm just going to technically ask about, and also the number of kids also an hour. I was kind of surprised about how low the numbers were. So again, those are warrants for the traffic signals. But yeah, so maybe those numbers, and again, the volume, I think I also, in the last 6 years, I think it talked about the less number of crashes, so it doesn't have a warrant, but I don't know what is the frequency looked at, because the traffic is significantly more. My son goes to the 4th grade now. The last 5 years, I think it seems like it's is twice or 3 times more crazy. So I think something needs to be done for sure. But I think as parents, we look forward to what is being finalized. But I just wanted to throw the couple of points. It is very problematic. I tried to take a left turn. It's very hard. And frankly, I'm also feeling bad for the crossing guards in winter, it's just hard for them. And I used to take a right turn, and then there's no U-turn now. I thought that was helpful, but I understand the U-turn actually increases traffic because the parents trying to take a left. I can see why that was done, but something needs to be done. So that's all I want to call for. I'm going to write my name here, I guess. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. We are still in public comment, so if anyone from the public wishes to speak, now would be the time to do so.
Hi, my name is Jessica Pop, and I am a mother of 2 children who go to Sugar Creek right now, a kindergartner and a 2nd grader, and also a mother of a 20-year-old who went to Badger Ridge about 7 years ago. So I've been in this area a long time, and I just wanted to, my comment is that I really feel like maybe there's multiple options that should be considered, like having the beacon, but I feel like the school would really benefit from having that second exit, because when my son did go to school there, my 20-year-old, that back drop off through Hemlock, a lot of parents go into that cul-de-sac and drop, and then the kids are trying to walk across, and it just seems like an obvious, maybe easier resolve than the light, but to have the beacon still for the other area, but having that second exit I feel like would be really important as well, because a lot of people do have to go to Epic or do go other ways that would relieve some of that congestion on Main Street. So that was kind of my main comment. But my other observation was looking at the warrants for the lights. I was a little confused about all the new traffic lights that I've seen recently going up in town, like the one on Paoli Road, the it's a 3-road intersection, and then having a traffic light at Culver's and stuff. I don't see how those areas could have warranted numbers of people crossing the street from Culver's as an area where children are going into school. And also just looking ahead, that school will now be an elementary school, and those middle-aged children will be probably needing a crosswalk at the east end of the high school, which is now Verona High, but that will become Badger Ridge Middle School. So those were just some of my thoughts I want to put out there as a mother and a community member, and so thank you.
Thank you. We are still in public comment, so if anyone wishes to speak, now would be the time to do so.
Hi, my name is Teresa Langton Gravine, and I'm the mother of the child who had the accident on the 11th. And one of my big concerns is, in order to do more research in regards to getting the lights put up in that area, I would not want to have the children to be put into any safety precautions. But I would want to have more research done in order to the fact that that area is, within a year or so, going to be quite a bit different than it is now, with all of the younger children and more children coming from other schools to this school. So that's something that seriously needs to be taken into consideration, because it'll be a lot busier than it actually really is now. So thank you.
Thank you. We are still in public comment, so if anyone from the public wishes to speak, now would be the time to do so. Sure.
I say one other thing. It's been wonderful to have the police officers there. People have really slowed down and been a lot more cautious when 1 or 2 officers are in the area. But it's amazing how when you guys are not there, that people kind of revert to their old ways. People are doing U-turns. I mean, it's very chaotic. And so I don't know if this would be a possibility, but to have 1 or 2 officers there during those peak times, just until a more permanent solution is figured out on what is going to happen in that intersection. Thank you.
Thank you. We are still in public comment. If anyone wishes to speak from the public, basically this will be your last chance for the meeting, so speak now or you'll have to wait.
I just have one thing that I really would like to say is I've noticed a lot of change since the accident has happened, and especially with the police department, and I really do want to thank you for being there. I really do. Thank you.
All right, seeing no one approaching the mic, we got 2 emails as well, with which Mr. Sayers is going to read to us.
I'm not going to read them.
Not-
I'm just going to reference
summarize.
that we received emails today and this past weekend from Paul Stein that regarding the intersection of Llanos and Main Street, an email from Kevin Van Horn regarding the intersection, and then also an email from Sue Hankinson regarding the intersection and also the development at 841 North Main Street. Those were provided to the council at your station tonight, and they were also emailed to the council as well.
Thank you for printing them out so everyone could see them. I know not everyone's checking their email every 30 seconds like I am. With that, we will move on to item 6, approval of minutes from the March 18th, 2019 Common Council meeting.
Move approval?
Motion by Alder Rieke, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alder Kemp. Any corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from the March 18th, 2019 Common Council meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And the minutes are approved. For item 7, mayor's business, I want to say 2 things. One, thank you to the police department for providing staffing by the school and for trying to keep that intersection safer. As other people from the public have said, they make a big difference. 2, I want to thank all the members of the public for testifying tonight and the people who have emailed and called, both myself and alder members, council members. I think, I've been mayor for like a little bit less than a year. So I can't speak to people's previous experiences, and I'm not going to comment on that. But I just want to say, like, this is part of the reason I wanted to become mayor, is so I'd be in the seat when something happened, and I would have preferred it to be something happier. But I want to be here because I want to fix problems. And so I don't know what might have happened in the past, but rest assured, both myself and I think the Common Council as well, we want to fix problems and make this a good community for everyone. But that's all I had. We'll move on to item 8, announcements. Does anyone from the council have any announcements? Seeing no hands go up, we'll move on to item 9, administrator's report. Mr. Sayer.
Thank you. I have a few items tonight. First one is the police department is hosting an active shooter training, which is tomorrow night from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at the Sugar River United Methodist Church at 415 West Verona Avenue. The public is invited to attend that, and pre-registration is required, and attendees must be at least 18 years or older. Public Works has seasonal hours now, so if you're looking to drop off yard waste, it is open 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Mondays. It's also open 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Tuesday through Friday, and then also on Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. So if you're looking to kind of drop things off, or if the public is, that is now open with our seasonal hours. The Tourism Commission met on March 20th. They talked about the use of excess room tax dollars, and the Commission will continue to discuss that policy at future meetings. There was a CDA meeting on April 4th, and there was continued discussion on the Sugar Creek Elementary School site, New Century School site, and also the city property at 130 North Main Street. As a reminder, there's a council organizational meeting next Tuesday, April 16th at 6:30 p.m. That's the meeting where committees are assigned and the mayor makes appointments to those committees. Staff continues to work on the warming and cooling center policy, so that's something that has been drafted. It's just a matter of trying to find some time with our spring break schedules in order to meet and discuss that further, but that policy is moving forward internally with staff. We also continue to make updates on our personnel policy relating to clothing allowance, time off, tuition reimbursement, and holidays. Additional staff reviews are necessary, but that will be going forward hopefully here to the May Personnel Committee meeting. Staff has also been working with Mayor Diaz on a climate change sustainability resolution, and we anticipate moving that resolution forward on April 22nd. Another reminder is that April 11th is Tornado Drill Day. That's where the sirens will go off in the city, and there'll be drills across the entire state. So just if you hear the sirens go off, I guess don't be surprised. As staff, we've also started posting all our packets online. So if you go looking for the Common Council packet tonight, if you're looking for a copy of the presentation that Darren and Jess made tonight, that's been posted online since Friday. So our goal now moving forward is to have all council and committee packets online, just to increase kind of the transparency and just knowledge of the public of what's going on in our committee and in our city. And then finally, I think Ellen has an update on Board of Review.
Thank you. Board of Review will need to meet within the statutory time frame, which is within 45 days of the fourth Monday in April, so in general in May. But because the property tax rolls will not yet be ready for review from our new assessor, we'll need to do a meet and adjourn meeting in May. They've given me a few options, date options. I will email those to all of you so that you can let me know when you'll be available. They're anticipating that we'll be having open book probably the first week in July with the Board of Review in late July, possibly the last week in July. Along with that, Board of Review training is required for at least one, preferably two of our Common Council members. I'll have that course in my office. It's available on CD for viewing at home, so you don't have to come in here to do it. There's a little workbook and a quiz upon completion, and then we have to send that into the state to let them know that we do have enough people trained for Board of Review before that date. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Any questions for the clerk or for the city admin? Alder Cole.
So I did that training last year. So that only lasts for 1 year? We need to have people do it every year, or is it valid for more than 1 year?
It's a 2-year training, so
I would still be considered valid for this year? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions for Clerk Clark or for the city admin? All right, we will move on to item 10, engineers report. Mr. Monpaz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So quick update for everyone. Work on the Fireman's Park splash pad has kicked into high gear with the warm weather. So the utilities are ongoing. Water and sewer are done. Storm sewers being finished up. Contractors started clearing and grubbing for the new path. Work on the retaining walls is ongoing. The roof is scheduled to be completed this week, and sheetrock is scheduled to be in late this week as well. Well 6, the contractors mobilized to start drilling the well, which is anticipated to take probably 4 to 5 months to complete the entire well, get it cased and ready for testing. So building construction will probably start in mid-fall, October, maybe November. And lastly, the transportation improvements for the high school. AECom and city staff are working diligently with JSD and reviewing the final bid package and specifications to get any other changes necessary for the contractors to provide prices for that by the end of the month. And we will continue to keep ongoing conversations with JSD and the city staff going.
Thank you. Any questions on the engineers report? Seeing none. Thank you. We'll move on to item 11, which is discussion and possible action regarding the potential transportation and/or pedestrian modifications related to the intersection of North Main Street and Llano Street, including the surrounding areas around North Main. I'm going to start off with one quick question. You talked about the U-turn, and my understanding is a lot of people use it, and it's illegal at the moment. But is there a circumstance where it would make sense for the city to allow U-turns there, or is that something that would cause other safety issues? Could you?
You could do so, at an intersection, unless it's, signed otherwise, but I don't think that you'd be allowed to, supersede state law and allow it, mid-block.
Gotcha. And then just one other comment, I guess, since you're kind of near the mic. It was raised.
Is that what that means?
I think you should come to the mic.
Thank you.
It was raised during public testimony, the possibility of having officers there at peak times. I guess, what is your opinion on staffing and the best way for the city to handle that?
My first reaction is sure, we'll help, where we can. The reality is we typically only have 2 officers working at one time. We do have a lot of schools and other activity as well. So you have that to balance. We have a shortage of crossing guards. That's been an ongoing challenge for us. Just twice in the last week in which crossing guards have had to leave their post that we had to fill in with one of our 2 officers that are working, in which we fill in at that location where you then find it very difficult to leave or abandon that site even for an emergency. So I'd like to say yes, we'll help where we can, but if we did something like that and committed to something like that, there would be really no other way for us to do it except for overtime and ordering officers in to work those special hours, because we just wouldn't be able to staff it.
Thank you. We'll open it up to the council. Questions, comments? Alder Touche, then Alder Gasco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I was listening through the options, all 3 of my children went through Core Knowledge. 8 years was my tenure through there, and fortunately I had a high schooler that drove my youngest in for the last 2. But I'm one of the residents that are on the 2 mile edge of what the school district will do for busing. Literally, if we lived a block further away from the school, my kids would have been bused in. And so as I think about traffic, I think about the number of cars. I know as a parent, I would put my kids on the bus joyfully every morning if that was an option. So I just wonder, did we, during your discussions with the school, did shortening or shrinking that bubble ever come up? Because I think if we did, there'd be less cars.
Mr. Jacobson?
Thank you. That was not discussed at the meeting with the school district. So
I would really appreciate if staff would approach the school. I think if the school really does care about pedestrian safety and reducing cars, that is something they should wholeheartedly consider.
Mr. Sayre?
I don't know if it was at that meeting or a different meeting. I've had a couple meetings with them lately, but there was discussion at some point as part of the redistricting and looking at the school sites. It might have been this morning at the IDAC meeting, actually, now that I think about it, but that was talked about as they wrap up their look at kind of what the schools are going to be from an elementary middle standpoint. And I think they're also looking at some grade configurations right now. There will be some conversation from the district on just busing in general, just what is the bus radius, because I know Mr. Grell had said there was a variety kind of across the board of how certain districts do it. So I think that was at the IDAC meeting. He kind of mentioned that in passing today, but I know I got the impression today that's part of the overall school district conversation as they kind of wrap up the school site. But we can circle back with the school on that and see when is that going to occur.
That'd be great. I do want to comment at a lot of the comments that the parents made. I'm guilty, like all of you, U-turning, trying to turn left, decide to turn. I mean, Thank goodness there's a sign there, because honestly, I didn't know I could do that back then either. It is a crazy intersection, and I'm very thankful I don't have to do that anymore. So I'm on your side. So thank you.
Alder Gaskell.
First of all, thank you, Theron and Jess, for that presentation and putting all of the options out there in a form we can understand them. I appreciate that. So I have a couple questions and then just want to talk about what I think my preferred option is. Just so we're clear, when schools switch around land use over there, Badger will become Sugar Creek, right? And then Core and VIS and New Century will end up at the high school along with Badger, right?
Mr. Sayre?
I don't know if that's been finalized yet. I know there's a couple different options and alternatives out there. I think there might be a meeting this week or even tonight.
Yeah.
Goodbye, everybody. Everyone, a good night. Thank you.
Fall asleep in there and like his head hits it. Okay, we can
I
keep talking.
can keep talking.
We
if
can
you
keep
want.
talking.
Okay, I'll just keep talking
All
because you can't see me anyways. My understanding was that that has not been finalized. I thought they were talking about that this week or potentially tonight.
Okay.
I thought there was the potential at one point of the simple kind of shift as you described, but I thought there was some great reconfiguration potential being discussed as well too.
Okay. So one question I have is how much control do we as a city have over reconfiguring school property for that second access and, second, using the bus access? I'm hopeful that in your meetings you're getting the impression from the school district that they're going to do whatever they can to work with us to come to the best conclusion and the best solution here.
Mr. Jacobson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The option that the school was supportive of at the conclusion of Wednesday's meeting was the cone option as an immediate response, which is a temporary fix. Regarding the internal circulations and those other improvements that we identified tonight, where their focus was definitely on pedestrian safety throughout their campus and not so much traffic management.
Okay.
That's a fair statement.
And then regarding funding, Theron, I assume that for the Highway Safety Improvement Program, we cannot start any construction until we have been awarded that contract. Is that right? You can't back bill for it.
That I didn't look into, but I don't know if Mr. Billmeyer can fill that in. Well, those are details we can definitely find out and answer.
Okay.
Obviously the funding, we wanted to wait till we got the direction from council on what options to pursue, and then we can hammer out those details.
So, for the sake of transparency, for a great part of my career, I was a bike and ped planner. First nationally, we did a lot of stuff for a lot of communities, and then most recently for Wisconsin, working for the Bike Fed. So this is not a unique problem. It's a pain in the butt problem because no matter what we do, we're still going to have those drivers that are going to just do what they want to do. And so we can't necessarily design for that one angry person. So related to the traffic signal, I personally don't support it because we're not going to meet the warrants. I know we're not, based on my experience, and also the fact that creating more problems there for drivers increases the likelihood of road rage there, for whatever reason. Alder Cole and I have children who go to New Century, and I've seen people go out in oncoming traffic with their car because they're frustrated because of the 5-car backup because of a crossing guard. So whatever we do, we have to, it's frustrating to me that we can't focus entirely on making it safer for pedestrians, because really that's what we should be doing. We also have to think about not making it worse for drivers, because there will be those drivers that we can't do anything about. That being said, I think the most logical option right now and the quickest is the rapid flashing beacon. We can get that in pretty quickly. I know I was part of it when it went in on McKee, and it's up to 85% compliance now, which is pretty great. We can't, though, just rely on infrastructure and engineering improvement. We're going to need some enforcement support. However, we can make that happen for Chief and his department financially. Even for the first month, people know that if they don't follow the rules there, if they blow through that crossing intersection, there's a fine of a couple $100s, and that's going to happen every single time. On top of that, I think we also need to work with the schools and do some sort of safe routes to school campaign, because the reality is the traffic is all parents driving there. We have to figure out why are parents driving there. Alder Cole and I have the same experience as Alder Touche, where literally I live like yards outside of the busing district. So I do pay for my daughter to come home, but I don't pay for her to go in the morning because I just drop her off in the work. So I'm part of that traffic problem. So working with CORE or whoever ends up in that building, I suppose it would be Sugar Creek, and because there's a big shift there, the parents now that can have their children walk to Sugar Creek are not going to be able to do that. So figuring out with the school district, internally within the schools, how do we help parents not have to drive every single time? And on top of that, work with the busing company so that, for instance, if a bus route already exists, which we have one that already exists, you know, allow parents who are just outside of the walk district to utilize the buses. Because the reality is that we can all drive really well as parents, but the worst offenders and the people we have to worry about are the other parents that we know that go to our schools. And this is a universal problem for all schools in Verona. The problem is that, you know, we're not on a major intersection. So I think I don't support the traffic signal, and based on the warrants and based on my experience, I don't want to have to pay for an engineering study to determine that we can't do it anyway. I think rapid flashing beacon, along with maybe some temporary lane closures just to see how they work. The thing with the cones that makes me nervous is my neighbor's a crossing guard, and the cones get obliterated constantly because people get annoyed and drive over them or around them. So I don't know how the cones would work there. Maybe traffic barrels that would dent your car would be more effective, but I think I said enforcement's gonna have to be it's basically have to go hand in hand with this. It's not just enough to put the lights up and assume it's gonna work. We're gonna have to make it so that pretty much you know when you enter the city of Verona limits, you better be driving the speed limit, and you better, especially in a school zone, be driving that 15 miles an hour until those lights are off. And if you don't, it's going to financially be painful. Thank you.
Alder Cole, and then Alder Kemp, and then Alder Cronin, and then Alder Tierney. Alder Cole.
Thank you. I have a couple things, a couple of questions and comments. One thing that I didn't see addressed was I was just thinking if we restrict traffic to right turns only, which I mean is a potential option, traffic turning right currently already backs up pretty far turning right because of the high school pedestrian crossing intersection. And so if we're having people only turning right and then the no U-turn, I think it will be increasingly difficult to turn right as well. It would just back clear up to Badger Ridge as well without any options of turning around. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that. And as far as also if we're restricting to right turn only, I want to echo what Ms. Edwards-Miller said about the increased traffic in residential areas, and those, either if you're going past the high school and turning right onto like Richards or Harriet, or you're turning left, there's no sidewalks in those areas, and the ones back behind the high school, they're heavily traveled by high schoolers, which I've seen a lot of insane driving back in there as well when high schoolers are arriving to school, and that would I think that would be something that we would also need to look at if that's the option that we decide to go with.
Alder Kemp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually attended this school, but I attended it in 1993, so the road used to actually come straight instead of having the swerve there. So, and there was no neighborhood, there was no Llanos, it was all farm field. So obviously Verona has changed quite a bit since that time. And one thing I think we need to consider, I'm not sure, we should probably discuss with the school district what the busing requirements are or limitations are for elementary school kids. My kids go to Sugar Creek. If that building ends up becoming Sugar Creek, I think that 2-mile radius is shorter or smaller for elementary age students. Is that correct? Okay, so I mean that would alleviate some of this. Theron, did you say that the school district's opinion or short-term solution was the cone option at this point?
Mr. Jacobson?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That is correct, Mr. Kemp.
Okay, I'm not, I'll just make it very clear, I'm not in favor of a traffic light at this point. I'm concerned about what that would do with having those two lights too close to each other and how that would congest Main Street. I think that the beacon right now seems to be the one that, would make drivers aware, along with what Alder Gaskell has suggested with an enforcement arm. I think people need to be much more vigilant when driving in school zone areas. My daughter, actually, I drop her off on Llanos at a daycare right down the street there, and I see a lot of near misses as well. We do need to have an enforcement arm, but I'd like to get something there as soon as possible, because we don't want to see something like this happen. However, we don't want to have overkill, and I think that a traffic light might seem like something that would solve the problem. I don't know if it would, or if we could even get it done under the law. That's all at this time.
Thank you. Alder Cronin?
So I would also agree that the flashing beacon is probably our best and most realistic option right now, especially because there is a sense of urgency. We want to get something done soon. But I think one of the main reasons I would be supportive of this is, in fact, because the crossing guards would be primarily in charge of using those signals, because I have driven on PD and on Midvale where there are the flashing beacons, and you're dependent on whether people push the button. And from my experience, a lot of the bikers who are using those crossings don't actually push the button. And so then you end up playing that same game of chicken where one car stops and one doesn't, and what happens. So I feel a lot more comfortable supporting the beacon option, knowing that there would still be crossing guards present to assist the children and hopefully encourage that learning curve for the kids if they're going to be using it outside of the crossing guard times, because there is after school activities, to encourage them to get in the habit of pushing that button so that they are more visible when they do cross that. The other comment I would make is, as a central Verona resident, I would also be concerned about the increased traffic in the residential neighborhoods, both due to just those neighborhoods not having had that experience with that increased volume. I'm sure we'll see that anyway with the change in the schools, but Alder Cole and Alder Gaskell are correct in the assessment of some of these neighborhoods do not have sidewalks. And if we are going to make changes that are going to make changes to the traffic patterns, I think we also need to consider the impact of adding sidewalks. Thank you.
Alder Journey.
So I live on the south end of Verona, where two flashing lights went up in 35-mile-an-hour traffic, and I use them almost every day, and they seem to be very effective, both coming and going. So I would favor the flashing lights instead of a stoplight. And then also, that's Highway M that goes all through Verona, and it's a 2-lane highway up until you hit Harriet Street, and then it becomes 3 lanes, 4 lanes, and just right at Harriet Street, that's when it becomes an express lane, either on the right-hand side or the left-hand side, going north. So I would propose putting down stripes to close the lane closest to the curb, with a turning lane into the cemetery and a turning lane onto Llanos Street. And it may back up traffic, but it's a thoroughfare, and for some reason people think that you can just start speeding when you hit that point. And that's regardless of what time of day it is. And it's a 25-mile-an-hour zone.
Alder Touche, and then Alder Cole.
Thank you. There was a question about traffic lights outside Culver's. I think 3 of us are on the council now that were here during the fire station install. That was actually put in for the fire station so we can stop traffic and get the trucks out. That's what allowed the lights to be so close to each other. Other than that, I don't think there'd be any reason to put them in there without the fire station. So that covers that. Oh, there's something else to add, please.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The signals at Enterprise and East Verona Avenue, the warrants was volume, and then proximity to the fire station and EMS for the preemption of the emergency response time to be activated to basically stop traffic. So, excuse me, so the fire and EMS got a clear path through there and control the intersection. That is wired into the fire station. So that was also one of the drivers for that intersection. And since I'm on that topic in regards to the other intersections where signals were put in, those all met warrants. Each of them had their own scenario, but there were multiple warrants that were met at the intersections that we did in 2017. Payola was crash, Old PB in Wayland was volume and crash data, West Verona Avenue was volume, and obviously that volume is only going to increase within the next year when the high school goes in. So all the signals in the city of Verona have met warrants.
Great. Thank you. I want to add, so the sidewalk question came up, specifically in Basswood and Hemlock. I actually don't remember if you two were with me when on council at the time. So there's a multifamily that went up on Cross Country in Hemlock, and there's a lot of discussion was brought up about adding sidewalks down Hemlock. We did put sidewalks in front of the multifamily at the time. That was part of the permitting process for them. So if my memory serves me correctly, there was a lot of interest in doing that. I think there was some concern about old trees that may have to go because of it. But what I remember is there was a lot of support. So if we were to consider an alternate route out of school that possibly took them out to Hemlock or Basswood, I think it's a requirement. I think the neighbors are going to want it. I think we're just going to have to do it if we're going to do that route. One other thing was, as I think through this, and especially, I can't remember the buzz phrase where it's the triple threat, right?
Double threat?
Or double threat. Well, it feels like a triple threat, but I've been guilty. Fortunately not in Verona, but why is everyone stopping? And you see it happen, and once you realize what's going on, you just feel like you're terrible, and thank goodness nothing happened. And I'm sure a lot of us can express similar feelings. So I think more about training and awareness. Some of the cons of the flashing lights are the sense of invulnerability. I press that button, I'm walking, and they better stop. And I just feel like there isn't enough public awareness out there. Like, you press the button, it's still your job as a pedestrian to make sure cars see the lights and they're gonna stop. Because as much as you wanna think that they understand what's going on, a person against the cars, the person's gonna lose. And same thing for the drivers, the triple threat, or the double threat, goodness. The car is stopping for a reason. If you potentially see a crosswalk, that's a good reason. Actually, this morning I ran into an issue where a goose was crossing from a pond into a parking lot, and I'm behind two other cars, like, what's going on? And I think there really does need to be a public awareness program, maybe even some training going on at the school for the kids about how these lights work. What it means when you press the button. It doesn't mean you start crossing. The flags in the city have been around for a long time. The city of Madison, some in the Verona. You see people grab them and start waving them, and they just march across the intersection, and it just feels very risky. I get what they're doing. They have the right of way. Legally, they're absolutely right, but they're still putting themselves at risk by not making sure the car stops. And there's a lot of distracted driving these days. We all have our smartphones causing us to look in the wrong direction, or just there's something else going on in the road. And I think it's very important for everyone to remind themselves that we need to think of our own safety and the safety around us and pay more attention to what's going on. So a little bit of a soapbox for me here, but I think we need to look at this from multiple levels. Not only do we use technology like the flashing beacons, which I'm all for. I think it's a no-brainer. I'm very interested in the alternate routes. I think it makes some sense, especially just looking at the flow of traffic, thinking about these right turns coming out of the school. We're just sending more cars towards the high school, and that's going to make that intersection even worse. I mean, whatever we do, there's going to be an impact. I think the flashing lights are the least impact and probably have the largest value, just given that they're going to alert people that there's people in the intersection. We do want to save people's lives. We don't want people to get hurt. But when we start rerouting traffic, it's just going to create a new mess. And we have to look at short-term impacts and long-term impacts. That's all I have. Thank you.
Alder Cole.
We've heard from Public Works and engineering staff. I was wondering if it was possible for Chief Coughlin or Sergeant Christensen to weigh in on what they thought would be the best public safety option from their opinion, their perspective, and what they see every day.
Chief Coughlin?
I think the flashing yellow beacon lights are probably about as close to a no-brainer as it gets, due to all the options that were laid out. I would describe them this way, as you guys have indicated earlier tonight. It'll take some training, some education on our part with pedestrians there. Pushing the button is a request to cross, not a demand. It's not automatic. And with our crossing guards, our intention would be to keep them operational as they are today. That the yellow flashing beacons would simply enhance their performance there. They would utilize them the exact same way. They would have the cones set up, the same reflective traffic vest, the stop sign, and they would still stack children before crossing, so you didn't have the issue as that was brought up today, where you had somebody presses it every 30 seconds. That's not helpful. That's much more helpful when the crossing guards aren't there, when there's less pedestrian traffic, when it's sporadic. I think it's less of an issue, but yeah, I think the yellow beacons are as close to no-brainer as possible. Taking a look at possible rerouting of some traffic and design flow with the school. Some of that I think makes more sense to do in conjunction with the school district's changes with the what school is going to become, what after the high school opens and is operational. So that makes most sense to do it there. I'm glad there's a discussion tonight about transportation in general, though, of bus transportation with kids, because that has been a challenge for us over the years, where actually we've had to add more crossing guards as a result of the school district's policy on busing, which causes me to kind of scratch my head, especially when we have a shortage of crossing guards. I think the focus there becomes more of not out of my budget. It's better out of theirs. Well, the reality is, to the taxpayer, it's coming out of the same purse. Let's make the best decision for long-term and overall that makes sense, not whose budget it's coming out of. So that's why have given in on those discussions over the years to add a crossing guard, even if it's something that was unnecessary or could have been prevented, because it's the right thing to do. But I think it could easily be revisited. At least have a discussion to see what the costs are and what the increase of costs would be. So,
Alder Cole, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Alder Posey.
Thank you. I think most of all, I'm glad to hear us talking about coordinating with the school district on this. I'm also a parent who's affected by the walking distance. And I think I've probably felt it not just daily when my kids are walking, and we live over on Aspen, so we're dealing with the high school students who are going to school at the same time my kids are trying to cross the street, and it's both nerve-wracking to drive and watch them cut corners and not taking that look to see if kids are coming along, and the elementary school and middle school kids who just aren't really paying attention because they're walking safely on a corner and they're being aware to what they think they need to be aware of. So that combination has always made me pretty nervous. So I'm really happy to hear us bring up these concerns. Also, a couple questions that I had was that there is another crosswalk down by the high school And have we done a count about how that impact? Do we have elementary or middle school students crossing there? So, because especially if we're doing only right-hand turns, we're gonna back things up because we've got folks who are crossing there. Because again, I'm a parent of Badger Ridge Middle School, so I'm doing the same thing sometimes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regarding the right turns exiting the school to southbound South Main Street, no traffic counts have been done. Will it increase traffic on South Main? Yes. Will it create more queuing on South Main Street backing up towards the north? Yes. Will it create more conflicts with other crossings, other intersections? Yes. It was an option. Those are definitely the cons of that option. But we're well aware of the pros and cons between each option. That's why we laid everything out. The increase in traffic in the residential areas, any comments that the public has made tonight, those are all things that we're well aware of and trying to be doing thoughtful thinking here, and also what professional, ideas, thoughts, recommendations that we would have towards this important intersection and a improvement for pedestrians and vehicular movements to make both of those safer to the maximum extent that we can.
Okay, thank you. And in addition to that, I do like the idea of the second exit, but I just don't like that location because that's where students who are walking from that neighborhood, if you are there around 8 a.m. to 8:15, that's where all the kids are walking. And parents who are dropping off, which I am one of them, to avoid this whole thing, to try and release congestion. We're all kind of dropping off, and even on negative temperature days, letting our kids just walk up that cul-de-sac and over to the school in order to avoid that. So I think that location might not be the best, but I do support that as a potential option in the future as we continue this discussion, because I don't think this is done by any means once we deal with this particular issue. This is going to be ongoing as we change the locations, we change the schools. This has to be a continually evolving discussion over the next several years as we're dealing with traffic patterns and everything else. So I hope we're making plans for that. Thank you.
Alder Gaskell?
Agreeing with Alder Posey, I live on the corner of Basswood and Hemlock in Hampton Court, and we have maybe 63 condo units, and I'd say easily 90% of them have children in them. The other side of Hemlock has a lot of multifamily as well, so it's a high concentration of usually younger families because it's a cheaper place to live in Verona, frankly. So it works well right now to have this alternate drop-off up the back, and traffic is not controlled there, but it's smooth. It's a moving blob, but it's still busy, I would say. But I would absolutely not support making that a one-way that dumps onto Basswood to alleviate traffic in front of the school.
Alder Rieke, and then myself.
Well, I just keep thinking through this conversation that everything's related to everything, and wouldn't it be great if we could find a fix for this particular intersection issue that would coincide with Earth Day and help us change behaviors and make Verona more walkable and reduce the number of cars in the first place, and maybe not have as many freezing cold days. But I guess I just need to say that I'm most in favor of the option of, for the time being, having the officers fill in as much as they can, and definitely when there are crossing guard absences, have officers take over during those school day drop-off and pickup times. And then I'm in favor of the RR flashing beacon, which would be operated by the crossing guard when they're on duty and otherwise operated by individuals outside of that time. So that's what I'm in favor of.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, I think that there's been several comments related to the school district, and I know the school district is busy with a ton of stuff, but I think there's clear direction to staff to push back on the school district. Like I said, I know they have a ton of concerns. I know they've got a ton of balls in the air, or whatever metaphor or allegory you want to use, but we got to push back on them a little bit and make sure that they're educating their students, educating the parents, educating the teachers, staff, everyone. Because my personal view is it's not going to be any one thing. There's no silver bullet. If there was a magic solution, someone would have done it already. And that we should work and try to get as many potential solutions as possible. I also like the beacon because of the data. The data just, it looks good. I tend to be persuaded by what's going to work best. It's also something we could do really fast, and I don't think it's a forever commitment. You know, if things changed, it wouldn't be as big of an infrastructure expenditure as some of the other options. I'm potentially open to the cones as an experiment, especially if the school district wants to contribute, or giant orange barrels to prevent cars from running them over, just because they can be taken down. You know, if we do it for a week and it doesn't work, we can take them down, and we didn't spend $2 million, you know, getting rid of that intersection. I guess then I have a final question for Mr. Sayer. As far as timeline and action tonight, what do you need from the council?
Yeah, I think if there's a motion that the council wanted to make on one of the preferred options, that would help us, especially as it relates to our future borrowing package. You know, I think if there is an option here that does require potential borrowing, which it sounds like the beacons are what I'm hearing most often from the council, that's something we'd want to get into our 2019 borrowing package. And then, you know, obviously there's grant opportunities out there as well, but we could look at those, but at least making sure that the funds are going to be available to get this in place by the start of the fall school year.
One follow-up. If the council did go with the beacon, what would the timeline look like? When would it go through, and then when would it get built? Mr. Jacobson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the availability of materials is the biggest complication right now with traffic control devices. It depends on if there's any contractors that I know that basically have them laying around in their yard. If they have them laying around, it'll be sooner. If not, the minimum lead time right now I've heard is anywhere from 12 to 18 weeks. So that's for traffic control devices. That's your full signals. These are a little bit more specialty, and they're not a custom item like our black poles or our blue signal poles. So we have engaged with a couple contractors to see what their availability is, and I think it's favorable towards us to do something sooner than later. And obviously it depends on costs. If the total project is over a certain amount, it has to be publicly bid. Otherwise, we can get a contractor in here and get the improvement done in an expedited manner. So, if that suffices.
It does. One other follow-up. I guess it was talked about the median not being wide enough as a potential refuge for pedestrians. Is that something that could happen in tandem with the flashing beacon?
With the flashing beacon, widening it, no. What we would do is extend it more south.
Okay.
Let me hang on a second here. Andy, can you turn the laptop on the screens, please? Has everyone got my red dot here? So what we would do is take the median that exists and we can extend it, take the nose more southerly, so at least that way the crosswalk goes through the median right now. So you wouldn't be widening it, at least there would be a landing there. It would work for foot traffic. Basically, most medians nowadays are designed for bike traffic, where it's a minimum of a 10-foot wide flange to flange. That's your joint between your pavement and your curb. So that could be done as part of this. So that would be a benefit.
Thank you. Alder Rieke and then Alder Touche.
Thanks. I think my question was mainly already answered, but I just wondered if the timeline could work out. I think you're going to look into this Mr. Jacobson about getting the funding retroactively if we were to install the flashing beacon before the start of the 2019-20 school year. And there was one other thing related to that, because it looks like the applications are due in September, but you could potentially turn in before that, I'm guessing.
Mr. Jacobson?
We'll look into the details of that, but I think timing is more of the essence here. If we're looking at a $20,000 improvement, that's a direction from the council to be given if we go for the grant or not, based on timing. So that we can have a future discussion, at least with the grant process going forward, once we have more of a timeline and those details laid out to give you more of an informed decision. So.
Thank you. Alder Touche?
Thank you. Talking about extending the divider there, yeah, I'd be curious to see what options you guys come up with that, because I'm just thinking about the buses turning in there. If it can be done on both sides of that intersection, because it makes a lot of sense, even though it can't handle bicycles. I think giving a place, especially for children, to kind of park if they need to or run to feel safe. Maybe even some sort of bollard there that might prevent a vehicle from jumping it, kind of a thing. Something. I'm just thinking out loud, of course, but I would love to hear a well thought out option. Short-term beacons, I agree. I would love to start hearing from our city staff on an education plan, and maybe even working with the schools to not only educate, they focus on the students and we can focus on residents. I think we have to do that. I think it's almost a no-brainer, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there that we need to address. Thank you.
Alder Gaskell?
Thank you. I have a comment and a request and then a motion.
Okay.
I want to make sure, just throw a little caution out there, that we don't throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. I don't think it's going to be very helpful if it sounds like we're moving towards one option here, which would be the rectangular rapid flashing beacon. But if we're going to mess around with cones and everything, it's not necessarily going to help us, because we're going to be constantly changing what's going on there, and it's just going to confuse people. So the request would be, if we land on this as the option, which I think we will, what would be the most effective, maybe temporary closure that we can look at? And we'd rely on you to maybe have one pop up to the surface, and then we consider that. The other part of that would be, until we can get this installed, Chief Coughlin, if you can give us some budget numbers, if you're going to need some financial support to support that intersection with staff, that would be helpful to know as well. And so with that being said, I'd like to make a motion that we direct Public Works to install an RRFB at that location initially, and then see what we can do to support that, both from an enforcement standpoint and also from maybe some other temporary leading to permanent infrastructure solutions.
Did staff catch the motion?
Second.
Just want to double check and make sure we got it written down. We good? Okay. Motion by Alder Gaskell, seconded by Alder Touche. We are now on the motion. Any discussion on the motion?
I just want to, again, echo what Alder Touche said. We really need to look at this like a little bit higher level here, and not just be worrying about this one intersection, because then we're just going to be worrying piecemeal about intersection after intersection. If we can start to think about a culture shift, and I always forget the name of the community, but you drive through it on your way to Door County, as soon as you hit Rosendale, but it's just, as soon as you hit that city limit, it's 30. Every single vehicle is doing 30 until you get to the other side. And it's just, that is the mentality. They've done a decent job and they're making money off of it, right? But if we can get to something like that in Verona, where it's expected that, unfortunately, if you're not going to drive that way, you will be financially punished with a ticket. I just don't want to do this intersection by intersection, especially as we move and start the high school. Are we going to have the same discussion in a couple of years because that intersection by the high school is a mess? So culturally, how do we start to shift that mindset of how you behave as a driver, a pedestrian, a cyclist, a bus rider, everything, and how does that function as a community as a whole.
Thank you. I just want to echo what Alder Gaskell said in the sense that I think it's really important to be proactive. I think Verona's changed a lot in the last few years, and it does feel like I said, I've been in this office for a little less than a year. It does feel like been playing catch up and dealing with some things that maybe should have been dealt with a while ago. But you know, we have to deal with things now, and I would like us, you know, as much as possible. You know, it's impossible to predict the future sometimes, but just be proactive and try to address situations before they get really bad. I'm sure it wasn't intended in this way, but like fines are to ensure compliance. We typically underestimate the amount of money we're going to accumulate from fines. We don't fine people to balance our budget. And I know people look at them that way, but like, believe it or not, the police department doesn't have quotas. No officers are not required to write tickets. We really want people just to be safe. And I just want to emphasize that point. But any other discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor, one last request
sure.
of Theron. If possible, it would be really helpful if we as a city can start to be at the table regarding circulation of transportation and circulation of traffic for the school shifts. I don't know that we're involved in that discussion. No, okay, so if you can make that request of the school district, that we can now come to the table and start to talk about how traffic is going to be affected when we start moving all the schools around, maybe we can get in front of this once they are actually in place.
Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, can we get the motion reread, just so we're all in the... Recorded, okay, it's recorded. But the motion as read by Alder Gaskell, which would instruct Public Works to build the beacon, and it also directs staff to come up with potential options, including the police department coming up with potential budgetary impacts, how much it would cost for additional enforcement there. Was that the understanding then of everyone? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes, and we will look forward to hearing back from everyone. Chief Coughlin?
Just a question, how far out do you want to go on that? What's the time frame?
I would say like a month after installation, because there'll be a gap before we get it in.
Okay.
And then,
Like an educational effort
right,
after?
and then a month after it's in, just to get people used to this, what happens when that happens. When they push the button.
You don't want it to include from now until construction? Why wouldn't you?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Jacobson?
We'll look at the DOT. I'm sure they've got some videos out there on education uses of these traffic control devices, similar to what they do for other types of intersections. I'm sure there's something from Federal Highway also that we can at least get out there sooner. And I just wanted to point that out. So.
Thank you. With that, we will move on to item 12, committee reports. 12A is Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Commission. Alderiki.
Thank you. I would like to make a motion to approve change order number 7 for Fireman's Park improvements.
Motion by Alderiki. Is there a second? Second by Alder Journey. Alderiki.
Thanks. This change order number 7 for Fireman's Park is in the amount of $36,464 for the addition of approximately 525 feet of sidewalk along Bruce Street for the entire frontage of Fireman's Park. The Park Recreation Forestry Commission recommended approval of the change order at the March 20th, 2019 meeting. The proposed funding for this change order is included in the 2019 borrowing for bike and pedestrian improvements.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions, comments on the motion? Seeing none. All those in favor of change order number 7 for Fireman's Park improvements, as described by Alderiki, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Anything further from Parks, Alderiki?
That is all.
Thank you. Next up, we will move on to item 12B, Planning Commission. Are you handling this one, Mr. Sayre? Want me to? Mr. Sayer?
Thank you. The first item is a conditional use permit for a group development located at 345 Investment Court that will allow for the construction of a 4,704 square foot storage building. The proposed conditional use permit will allow for the construction of that storage building on Investment Court. The Plan Commission held the required public hearing on April 3rd and voted 5-0 to recommend for the approval.
Were there conditions on that one?
There were no conditions on that one.
Excellent. Questions, comments, motions from the council? Alder Gaskell.
Move approval.
Motion by Alder Gaskell. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alder Kemp. Any discussion on the conditional use permit for 345 Investment Court? Seeing none. All those in favor of resolution number R-19-014, approving a conditional use permit for a group development located at 345 Investment Court that would allow for the construction of a 4,704 square foot storage building, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Mr. Sayer.
Thank you. The next item is a conditional use permit for an indoor commercial entertainment land use known as Hammer Forged CrossFit, located at 606 West Vernon Avenue. The Plan Commission held a required public hearing on this conditional use permit on April 3rd. Discussion by the Plan Commission included questions and comments regarding the parking and the conditions of approval, and the Plan Commission voted 5-0 to recommend for the approval of the conditional use permit with the following conditions. 1, Hammer Forged CrossFit shall be limited to 15 people on site at one time, which includes customers and staff. And 2, the arrival and departure of customers attending classes must be staggered between 3 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. respectively. And the intent of those conditions is to deal with the parking constraints out there. If you've ever been on that property with its Time Bar and Grill, during some peak hours, parking can become challenging. So the intent was to try to address those as the conditions of approval.
And just to note, in the packet, item condition B was noted in the packet. However, the Plan Commission did not recommend it. Just to clarify for people.
In the staff report, there was actually 3 conditions, yeah. In the actual resolution approving this, there's only the 2 conditions that were recommended by the Plan Commission.
Just to clarify. Questions, comments, motions? Alder Posey.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that thank you very much for pressing on the parking issue in that section there. So I just wanted to stress that and thank you for doing that.
Alder Ricky.
I just wondered if there was any discussion about how realistic it is to only have 15 people on the site.
Mr. Mayor.
Alder Gaskell?
I actually work out there, and I think the biggest class I've been in was maybe 4 people. It physically is not big enough to accommodate that many athletes at one time, so.
And just to add, the applicant was at the Plan Commission meeting and he was asked about it and he seemed totally on board with that restriction. Questions, comments, motions?
Move approval.
With the conditions specified?
With the conditions specified, the 2 conditions specified, yes.
Motion by Alder Gaskell. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alder Kemp. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none. All those in favor of resolution number R-19-015, approving a conditional use permit for a proposed indoor commercial entertainment land use known as Hammer Forged CrossFit, located at 606 West Vernon Avenue, with the 2 conditions specified, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Mr. Sayer.
Thank you. The next item is a resolution for a conditional use permit to allow an institutional residential land use to be located at 841-857 North Main Street that will allow for the construction of a 100-unit senior living facility. The Plan Commission held a required public hearing on this item on April 3rd. Discussion by the Plan Commission included questions about the traffic in the area, discussion about landscaping, and questions about the overall parking for the development. The Plan Commission voted 5-0 to recommend for the approval with the following conditions. 1, a deed restriction shall be recorded on the property restricting the use of the property to an indoor institutional residential land use with age-restricted housing for persons ages 55 and older, and that should occur prior to the issuance of building permits and after the applicant records a certified survey map for the development. 2, the applicant and the city shall enter into an agreement to require the applicant to install plantings on public lands and to require the applicant to construct a north-south bike pedestrian path connecting the North Edge Trail to the city's outlot The city owns an outlot just east of here, and the applicant is putting some landscaping on there and putting a bike and ped connection as well. So that's the purpose of that condition. 3, as part of the landscaping agreement, the applicant shall be required to install the landscaping on the city property as soon as practical to provide additional growth and buffering from the adjacent residential areas. The purpose of that condition is we think there's an ability for the applicant to plant those before construction is over, and to give some additional growth time to kind of better screen the property from the adjacent areas. 4, prior to the issuance of building permits, the applicant shall complete a certified survey map. 5, prior to the issuance of building permits, the applicant shall provide the city with a copy of the shared parking agreement with First Choice Dental. And 6, the developer shall add more significant evergreen landscaping to screen the subject property, and the revised landscaping plan shall be subject to staff approval. The applicant on that number 6 is already working with the adjacent property owners on what that revised landscaping plan will look like.
Thank you for that explanation. Alder Touche.
I would like to add a comment before anyone makes a motion. We're building this right next to the school that we just finished addressing item number 11 on here. Honestly, have we done a traffic study or anything that kind of says this isn't going to impact the school, because I really don't want to make things worse right now?
No.
We did do a trip generation study on the assisted living facility. We compared the assisted living to other uses that could fit on the site, like an apartment, condo, daycare, medical dental office, or a general office. The assisted living generates about 360 trips per day. And keep in mind, trips are in and out is 2 trips, so it'd be like 1 car coming and going 180 times. There are about 33 trips in the AM peak, or about 1 every 2 minutes. About 41 trips in the PM peak. This would be after the school peak. It'd be the PM rush hour, not the school release. About 41 trips in that peak, or about every 90 seconds. The assisted living had lower trips in the day than all of the land uses except for a condo development. That was about 1/3 of the size of the assisted living. The use also has lower peak traffic than all of the other uses because there's not much demand to go in and out during the rush hour from that facility, and the trips are spread out over the day.
If we did nothing, does that increase or decrease the trips? I'm thinking if we do nothing right now, I don't think we're making things any worse. In fact, better than the potential future.
Correct. So all the trips I said would be on top of the current traffic that's there.
Because we have a house that's there, a barn, an empty field. They're not generating that many trips. So I'm just pointing out, which feels like really bad timing for this building, unfortunately. I'm just not overly comfortable right now.
Jess, you said how many?
Alder Journey, and then Alder Gaskell.
I would just like to concur with what Alder Touche just stated.
Alder Gaskell.
Thank you. The number of trips generated for the whole day is what?
360.
And then we had 800 plus during the peak hour for school, right? So that provides a little bit of perspective, because it sounds like a lot, but the reality is it's not. We have 870 cars in 1 hour across the street versus 1/3 of that for the entire day.
Well, we're going from 2 to
sorry.
300? I'm sorry.
Did you have your hand raised? Because I'll call again. Okay. Alder Cronin?
This is a separate issue from the impact of increased traffic, but we were contacted by constituents who are concerned about parking on residential streets around the development. Now, my understanding is that this is an assisted living facility, and the number of actual drivers is less in an assisted living facility than a normal residential development. I just want to ensure that the concern that was raised was more about staff who work in the building having enough parking to accommodate them as well, so that there would not be the possibility for them to want to park on a residential street.
Mr. Sayre?
Yeah, I mean, the possibility is always there. It's also a function of the operations of the facility. I mean, what I anticipate happening is there's a parking lot on the north side of the facility where the dumpsters are. that's typically where the staff is gonna park. I mean, is there a chance staff could park on the street there and walk in from a different door, or just wanna go for a walk? Yes, of course. But part of that's gonna be with the operations of the facility. If that becomes an issue, that's something we can address with the operator of, tell your staff to park on the property. They do have sufficient parking on the site, so it won't be an issue with that. With that shared parking agreement with First Choice Dental, I mean, it's additional parking that people could use if need be, but I see that more as an operations issue, if anything, versus an actual site itself. So I think, like I said, if that becomes an issue, we'll just deal with that with the operator.
Other comments, questions, motions?
I'll move approval, subject to the conditions listed.
Motion by Alder Gaskell. Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Cronin. Anything to add, Alder Gaskell? No, thank you. We are now discussing the motion. Questions, comments on the motion? I guess I have one. The question for staff, the condition 6, which I added at the Plan Commission, do you feel that the applicant is going to meet the needs of the person at 802 and 803 the adjacent street?
Yeah, I'll be honest. There was an email that came in at 5 o'clock today. I haven't read it, and it's quite lengthy. End of the day, I think we'll get to the point where staff will be comfortable. I don't know if we'll be at full comfort with the adjacent owner, just because sometimes it doesn't happen. But I need to look at this email, and I just pulled it up now, and like I said, it's quite lengthy. So we'll continue to work with both parties and see what we can do here to kind of resolve it. I know we're going to do our best to get that resolved, and I know the applicant is working on it as well too.
Okay. Further questions or comments on the motion? Alder Journey.
Where is the access? Which road is the access to that property?
Yeah, sorry.
There's 2 access points to North Main Street. The southern access point is a right in, right out, and then the northern access point is actually it's a full access, so you have that left turn movement, but it's a shared access with First Choice Dental. So they'll take the existing First Choice Dental access point and make some enhancements and improvements to it, but it would stay in the same spot that it is today.
So they won't be coming out on Lano Street then?
No, they will have no access to Lano Street. They will have no vehicle access to North Edge Trail. I think there's a sidewalk that comes from the southeast corner of the building that potentially goes out to North Edge Trail. That might just be for, emergency purposes. But I mean, that there is a sidewalk that does come out of that back building there. But vehicle access, no, that's going to come from North Main Street.
Additional comments, questions on the motion? Last chance. All right, seeing none. All those in favor of resolution number R-19-016, approving a conditional use permit to allow an institutional residential land use to be located at 841, 847 North Main Street, that would allow for the construction of a 100-unit senior living facility with the conditions specified, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no?
No.
No.
So that was, no's. Okay. And that motion passes 6-2. We'll move on to item 4, Mr. Sayer.
Thank you. The last item is a precise implementation plan for the Sugar Creek Commons Hotel and Event Center that we located at 509 West Verona Avenue that would allow for the construction of a 120-room hotel and a 300-seat conference event center. The Plan Commission held a required public hearing on this item on April 3rd. Comments from the Plan Commission included discussion on the recommended conditions from staff, a desire to have the hotel better complement the materials in the Sugar Creek Commons mixed-use area, and directed the applicant as a condition of approval to work with staff on changes to the design. The Plan Commission voted 5-0 to recommend for the approval with the following conditions. 1, the applicant and Sugar Creek Commons shall enter into an easement agreement to allow the applicant to utilize a portion of their property for access to the applicant, and St. Vincent de Paul shall enter into a shared parking agreement to allow the applicant to utilize parking at the St. Vincent de Paul site. 3, the applicant and the Holiday Inn Express and Suites and Fairfield Inn and Suites shall enter into a shared parking agreement to allow the applicant to utilize parking at these locations. The intent of all 3 of those is to increase shared parking in the area, especially with an event center. It makes sense to require that, and plus the operator of this new hotel is the same operator as the Holiday Inn Express and Fairfield Inn and Suites. So just trying to put that agreement in place so it's legally there. Condition number 4, the applicant shall modify the building elevations to better complement the Sugar Creek Commons development subject to staff approval. And then 5, the applicant and Sugar Creek Commons shall enter into a shared parking agreement to allow the applicant to utilize parking at the Sugar Creek Commons property.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions, comments, motions? Alder Gaskell.
I would like to move approval subject to the listed conditions.
Motion by Alder Gaskell. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Kemp. Anything to add, Alder Gaskell?
No, thank you.
All right. You have a motion before you. Questions, comments on the motion? Oh, Alder Posey.
I have a question, 2 questions actually. One is regarding the parking at St. Vincent de Paul, which has had a surprising number of people there, I think, in especially on busy Saturdays, Sundays, which would also be obviously event times. Is this something that they've already spoken to them about and how that's going to fall into place? Or is this something where they could end up, St. Vincent de Paul could end up feeling pressure to enter into this agreement because they're kind of, because there isn't a whole lot of parking there now when it gets very busy on the weekends.
Mr. Sayre?
Correct. The applicant has had conversations with St. Vincent de Paul. They're working on that shared agreement. As part of that, they would be restriping that parking lot as well. So right now it is woefully underutilized because of the lack of striping on it.
Right.
So St. Vincent and the applicant are working in conjunction together on that. And no, I don't see St. Vincent having an issue with the condition because those conversations are occurring now.
Thank you. My other question was, reading through the precise implementation plan, all the information you gave us, there was some discussion about the staff recommending the applicant use additional brick materials and higher quality materials. And was that going to occur as well, or would it look kind of as, it does in the renderings?
Yeah, that's a condition that's actually number 4, and the purpose of that condition is, we don't think it needs to match Sugar Creek Commons. It needs to better complement that. So there's a lot of ephes on the building. That's that stucco type material. That's material that actually is not found on the Sugar Creek Commons mixed use area. So the purpose of that condition is, as part of this project is in a TIF district. We think one should be held to a higher quality standard because of that. But second, we feel as part of any type of conversation with the potential incentives there, we can finalize that condition kind of as part of those conversations of, the additional reviews for that reason. So, we think they're off to a good start, but there needs to be some modifications to kind of give it a better fit. And some of that too, with some of the renderings that they provided, it could be a rendering issue of just the colors on there as well too, but we think we have ample time to kind of address that concern as a condition as it's listed here because of those future agreements.
Thank you very much.
Questions, comments on the motion? Seeing none. All those in favor of resolution number R-19-017, approving a precise implementation plan for the Sugar Creek Commons Hotel and Event Center to be located at 509 West Verona Avenue, that would allow for the construction of a 120-room hotel and a 350-seat conference event center with the conditions specified, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. And that motion passes. And there is nothing further from Plan Commission. We will move on to 12C, Public Safety and Welfare Committee. Alder Rieke.
Thank you. I would like to make a motion to recommend that the Common Council approve a special event permit application from Alex Ogden for 4 events for the Wisconsin Beer Run 5K and .05K on Saturday, October 19th, 2019.
Motion by Alder Rieke. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Cole. Alder Rieke.
Thanks. Explanation is that this is the third year for this event in Verona. The event will run from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. The Wisconsin Beer Run is a chip-timed 5K. 414 will be partnering with Hop House Brewing Company, which is designated as the end of the event route. Residents will be notified of the date and time of the street closures on Railroad Street and South Franklin Street. Approximately 800 people are expected to participate in the event. Approval of this event is contingent upon submittal of a certificate of insurance naming the city of Verona as the certificate holder. So that is part of my motion.
And that was the understanding of the second as well?
Yes.
Okay. Anything further to add, Alderiki?
No.
Okay. Motion before you. Questions, comments on the special event permit? Seeing none, all those in favor of granting a special event permit for Alex Ogden of 414 Events for the Wisconsin Beer Run 5K and .05K on Saturday, October 19th, 2019, with the conditions specified, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Alderiki.
I would like to recommend approval of a special event permit for the Verona Area Chamber of Commerce Spring Extravaganza on Saturday, April 20th, 2019.
Motion by Alderiki. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alder Kemp, I think. Alderiki.
This is the first year for the Spring Extravaganza. The event will take place at Harriet Park and will run from 9 a.m. to noon. Requested permit time is 7:30 to 1:30 to allow for setup and teardown. Breakfast with the Bunny will consist of pancakes and juice. Brats, chips, and soda will also be sold, along with flavored alcoholic seltzers. Treat-filled plastic eggs will be given away. There will also be several make-and-take crafts for the kids, including potted flowers and construction paper bunny ears. A temporary Class B retailer's license is required for the sale of these alcoholic beverages at this event. So this is a new spring chamber event.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions, comments on the motion? Alder Touche.
Is there a pub crawl after this one? I'm ready. Sign me up.
Alder Cronin.
I would also just like to make the comment that while I do understand that the sale of alcohol is a fundraising opportunity, for family-friendly events like this, I personally would like to see some of these events be alcohol-free.
Any other questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of granting a special event permit for Lee Jordan, Verona Area Chamber of Commerce for the Spring Egg Extravaganza on Saturday, April 20th, 2019, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
No by Alder Cronin. And that motion passes 7-1. Alderiki.
I would like to make a motion to approve a temporary Class B and Class B retailer's license from the Verona Area Chamber of Commerce for the Spring Extravaganza event on a Saturday, April 20th, 2019 at Harriet Park, 414 Mary Lou Street, Verona, Wisconsin 53593, Lee Jordan, agent.
Motion by Alderiki. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alder Cole. Alderiki.
This goes along with the previous motion. This temporary Class B and Class B retailer's license allows the Verona Area Chamber of Commerce to sell alcoholic beverages at the Spring Extravaganza event.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions, comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the application for a temporary Class B and Class B retailer's license for the Verona Area Chamber of Commerce for the Spring Egg Extravaganza on Saturday, April 20th, 2019, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
And that motion passes 7-1. Anything further, Alderiki?
That is all, thanks.
Thank you. Next up, we will move on to 12D, Finance Committee. Alder Kemp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I'd like to make a motion regarding the proposal for the zoning and sign ordinance rewrite.
Motion by Alder Kemp. Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Cronin. Alder Kemp.
Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is something that we've been discussing for quite some time now. Mr. Sayer did inform the Finance Committee that he is recommending to the council that we take the proposed contract. Originally, the amount that was going to be required to get this done was around $120,000, to be exact, $119,890. In discussions with the company, Mr. Sayer was able to get the price down to $99,855. We will have to budget accordingly for the Verona zoning and sign ordinance rewrite. However, we will, prepare for that in the very near future. Mr. Sayer, did you have anything to add?
No, the process to redo this would be about 12 to 18 months, closer to the 18-month timeline. And that would involve both the Plan Commission and the council.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions, comments on the motion? I'll just say that I know it's expensive. I appreciate staff helping save the public some money. But these are the kind of things that can last, for 20, 30 years. And so if you prorate it out over that whole time, it's a small cost, and making ordinances clearer to read and understand is something I think that's well worth it. Any other further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting the proposal for the zoning and sign ordinance rewrite signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Alder Kemp.
Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion regarding approval of the room tax agreement between the City of Verona and the Verona Area Chamber of Commerce.
Motion by Alder Kemp. Is there a second? Second by Alder Posey. Alder Kemp.
Again, for the sake of discussion, Mr. Mayor, this is a room tax agreement that has been drafted between the City of Verona and the Verona Area Chamber of Commerce. This, as I understand it, is essentially an agreement that we have been implementing for the past 18 months. This actually gets it down on paper so we can have something official. The city sets the room tax at a rate of 7% from all gross receipts from such retail furnishings of rooms or lodgings. Then what happens is 54% of that from what's collected goes to the City Tourism Commission, and then eventually to the chamber. So really at this point we need to get an agreement that's official between both entities.
It would be good to have an agreement. Motion before the council. Questions or comments? Alder Touche.
54? Not 50 or 60 or 55? How did 4 end up there is my question. Do we know?
Mr. Sayer.
It's kind of set by statute that 70% of the revenue must be held for tourism purposes. So the city retains actually 30% of it, and we use that 30% for banners, beautification efforts around the city, also to offset our general fund. And then the other portion of that goes to the Tourism Commission, and then also the Destination Madison, which is the kind of the sports convention and Madison Chamber, and that's their new name for it, is Destination Madison. But then it goes there, and they help track a lot of the larger events like Ironman and CrossFit Games. So there's certain percentages, though, spelled out in statute of how the money needs to be distributed.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of agreeing to the room tax agreement between the City of Verona and the Verona Area Chamber of Commerce signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Anything further, Alder Kemp?
No, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Nope. We will move on to item 13, new business. We have discussion and possible action regarding the recruitment of a city administrator. Thank you to Mitch for sticking through the whole meeting. Oh, if there's consent of the council? No objection? Okay. No, wait like one more minute. We will temporarily move on to 13B, which is discussion and possible action regarding the approval of the operator licenses. Clerk?
So I need a motion, please, to approve the operator licenses as presented by the city clerk.
So moved.
Motion by Alder Cole. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Riki, I think. All those in favor of approving the operator licenses signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Okay, now we are ready to talk about 13A, which is recruitment of the city administrator.
Sorry.
Well,
Can you hear me now?
yeah, we're good.
All right. A couple updates, just general updates with the city administrator recruitment since we last spoke. And then, so I can give that to all of you guys here tonight. And then secondly, the other thing I'd like to discuss is the process of reviewing the process and procedures of reviewing the resumes or application materials with that group who has volunteered to be part of that process. I would recommend, if possible, having that discussion with the resume review panel in closed session for two reasons. First, we'll be discussing the competitive selection criteria that we'll be using in detail. The job announcement is still posted, so if there was that first review date was last night. So in theory, an applicant could still be considered by applying after that first deadline date and receive potential future consideration. And having that discussion in an open session could allow the candidate to potentially tailor their resume or cover letter to that criteria. So just to protect the integrity of that process, it's going to be very important that our raters or the group on that rating panel has a very good understanding of the criteria that we'll be using. So we'll get into some detail with that. The second part to that is we may bring up information about some of the candidates just when applying the criteria to the application materials. So it's something that, in interest of protecting the applicant, that would be my second suggestion for possibly going into closed session for that part. But I can provide the updates now, the general overall updates. So just high level. So overall, things are on track in terms of our tentative timeline. We posted the job on the 28th of February, and that initial first deadline date was last night at midnight. So we ended up with 71 applicants that applied for the position. So I went through then those applications, and out of those 71, we had established some very, basic minimum requirements to help screen some of those out initially. After doing that initial screen, we are down to 50, so I'll be referring 50 candidates onto the panel. I will say that there still needs to be some screening done, but I think we have some good candidates, and I think a lot of this was in large part due to the strategy in the different recruitment venues we discussed where we posted the job. I got a lot of feedback from council, and we were able to time that really well with the postings. So I think overall I'm pleased with the number of applicants, but we'll start to really start to identify their qualifications as we start going through this screening process. So next steps, the group rating the 50 applications. I'll be meeting with you here tonight as scheduled to go over those procedures. You'll all be able to take those items home and do that over the next week. Next Monday is when I'll ask that those scores be returned to me. And then we can start looking at interview invites. And the idea is that we're going to try to invite our top 5 candidates in for interviews. Now, depending on the way the scores work, it's in theory we could have a few more than 5 if there's ties. But we'll look at that. We won't know that until we actually go ahead and send those, or actually get the scores back. So I can keep everybody updated on that. We'll also be planning to do first round interviews. It looks like between the 29th of the month and the 8th. So I did send out that doodle invite. If you guys have any questions about that, let me know. But just go ahead and fill in your availability. And like I said in that email, I'll try to schedule based on common availability amongst the group. So that's kind of next on the next on the list is interviews. So we'll, after first round interviews, then of course we have also talked about doing second round interviews, and I'll be working with a number of department heads who did not apply for the position to also form a panel. So I'll be doing that this week as well. So really the next steps here are getting those applications reviewed and rated, and then moving on to interviews. So we're moving right along within the timeline that we established to start.
Thank you. Any questions or potential motions? Alder Cole.
I'd like to make a motion to move into closed session regarding the recruitment of a city administrator.
You have to.
You want me to read the?
Yeah.
Okay. The Common Council may convene in a closed session for discussion and possible action regarding recruitment of a city administrator as authorized by Section 19.85, paren 1, paren C of the Wisconsin statutes to consider employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee subject to the jurisdiction or authority of the City of Verona. The Common Council may reconvene in an open session to discuss and take action on the subject matter discussed in the closed session.
Motion by Alder Cole. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Gaskell, I think. This is, of course, a roll call vote. If the clerk would read the roll.
Alder Kemp?
Yay.
Alder Cole?
Aye.
Alder Posey?
Aye.
Alder Ricky?
Aye.
Alder Touche?
Yay.
Alder Cronin?
Aye.
Alder Gaskell?
Aye.
Alder Journey?
Aye.
All right, we will be in closed session as soon as we're off there. Well, we're back on camera, so anyway, thank you, Mitch, for explaining how the process is going to work. Thank you to everyone who's doing screening. With that, we are on to item 14, adjournment. Motion to adjourn would be in order. Motion by Alder Gaskell. Is there a second? Second by Alder Cronin. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And we are adjourned at 10:18. Thank you.